When will the dumbest criminals ever learn? The answer is never. Let's find out who the dumbest criminals are, starting with number 7, CEO of Real Bosses Don't Do This. Jasmine Clifton from Charlotte, North Carolina, is definitely in hot water with the feds. They hit her with federal charges for pulling off a scam to steal nearly $150,000 in COVID-19 relief funds from the U.S. Small Business Administration. She thought she could fool them by submitting false information for an economic injury disaster loan for her online clothing business, Jazzy Jazz LLC. But her scheme didn't fly, and now she's grounded. Clifton got crafty and submitted forged documents to beef up her loan application. She cooked up a fake tax document and cooked the books by inflating her revenues. Talk about playing with fire. She had the audacity to claim that her business, Jazzy Jazz LLC, was a victim of the pandemic, even though she had shut it down months earlier. Clifton managed to score a cool $149,900 in disaster relief funds. The whole point of those funds was to help struggling businesses hit hard by the pandemic. But did she use the money to get back on her feet? No way. Instead, she went on a wild shopping spree, hitting up fancy stores like Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, and Louis Vuitton, and even splurging at diamond stores. What's truly mind-boggling is how Clifton tried to portray herself as a hard-working CEO and a self-made entrepreneur. She took to social media bragging about building her business from scratch. She even had the nerve to brush off people asking for loans or favors, acting like she was all about that independent boss life. Clifton's actions finally caught up with her when a federal grand jury indicted her on charges of wire fraud and fraud related to major disasters or emergencies. Number 6. 10 weddings and a prison sentence. Liana Barrientos, a New York woman with a penchant for serial marriages, went on a decade-long spree of tying the knot with multiple men simultaneously. This bride, a 38-year-old blonde, astonishingly managed to get married a staggering 10 times since 1999. In 2002 alone, she exchanged vows and said "I do" 5 times. The lingering question, however, is why she never bothered to get divorced from any of her husbands. Authorities soon discovered that Barrientos wasn't seeking love, but was actually involved in a marriage-for-hire immigration scheme. In 2006, authorities even deported one of her husbands due to his concerning statements against the United States. This incident raised alarming concerns about potential security breaches and the ease with which the system could be manipulated. Barrientos managed to dodge detection for years by altering the spelling of her name on marriage licenses and filing marriage documents in various locations throughout New York State. She deliberately sought out men from countries that were deemed red flags for immigration, including Egypt, Bangladesh, Turkey, Czechoslovakia, Pakistan, Mali, and Georgia. At times, she was astonishingly married to a total of 8 men simultaneously. In a weird attempt to cover her tracks, Barrientos boldly claimed on her 2010 marriage documents that she had never been married before. She even insisted to investigators that her marriage to a man named Sal Keita was her first and only marriage. However, further investigations revealed the truth behind her web of lies. Barrientos, who has children from different fathers, faced charges related to falsifying official records. She pleaded not guilty to 2 felony counts of filing a false instrument. If convicted, she could be sentenced to a maximum of 8 years in prison. The involvement of the Department of Homeland Security in this case obviously shows the seriousness of the investigation. The fact that she was married to a man who was deported due to threatening statements raises valid concerns about potential national security risks associated with her actions. You'd think that being married that many times would be punishment enough for everyone. Number 5. No smokes left behind. Robert Tutaki Kemp from Bell Block in New Zealand found himself on the wrong side of the law. he became embroiled in a burglary that resulted in the theft of over $5,000 worth of stolen property. Kemp's criminal actions unfolded in September 2017 when he targeted a residence in his hometown. With a determination to gather as much loot as possible, Kemp forcibly entered the house by smashing through a window. Once inside, he ransacked each room, sifting through drawers and cupboards and scattering items in his search for valuables. However, fate had a twist in store for Kemp. He left an unsmoked roll-your-own cigarette at the crime scene, and little did he know that this seemingly insignificant item would become the key to solving the crime. Forensic analysis of the cigarette revealed Kemp's DNA, leading to his arrest. This burglary wasn't an isolated incident in the area. Other homes had fallen victim to similar break-ins around the same time, prompting the police to issue a warning to the community. Authorities suspected that Kemp's criminal activities extended beyond the single offense for which he was charged. The style employed by Kemp aligned with the patterns in other burglaries. In particular, the burglar had a habit of searching bedroom drawers and targeting valuable jewelry. The accumulating evidence strengthened the suspicion that Kemp was involved in multiple thefts. During his trial, Judge Chris Sygrove acknowledged Kemp as a repeat offender with a lengthy record of criminal charges. In light of the evidence and the nature of the crimes, Kemp was sentenced to 2 years in jail, subsequently converted to 12 months of home detention. As part of his punishment, Kemp spent some of his detention in a rehabilitation facility in Auckland. Additionally, he was ordered to pay $200 in reparation to the victims to cover the insurance. Do you think this is enough to get him to quit smoking? Number 4. Gambling with time. Hype Kong Van and Thai Min Fan orchestrated a scam that tricked an Oregon retiree known as RW into loaning them over $3 million. The unsuspecting retiree believed he was making investments in a landscaping business based in Colorado and covering legal expenses. Except by landscaping business, Hype and Thai meant funding our extravagant lifestyle. For several years, the deceitful couple indulged in a life of luxury in Las Vegas, frequenting renowned casinos like the Bellagio, Caesar's Palace, and MGM Grand. They went on a gambling spree that saw them squander approximately $2.5 million of the ill-gotten money they had obtained. Van, posing as a struggling Colorado businessman, painted a desperate picture of a business on the verge of collapse. He even went as far as saying he was thinking of ending it all, leaving the retiree with little choice but to extend a helping hand. But their deceptive endeavors were eventually exposed when the IRS caught wind of the scheme. The couple's extravagant lifestyle in a Las Vegas suburb came to an abrupt halt as they were arrested and transported to Oregon to face charges in a Portland courtroom. Interestingly, even after their initial arrest, Van couldn't resist the allure of gambling. While awaiting trial, he returned to the world of casinos, displaying a complete lack of remorse and a failure to learn from his mistakes. During their court proceedings, Van pleaded not guilty to charges of conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud, but he was ultimately sentenced to 37 months in federal prison. Van also faced the consequences and received a sentence of 21 months. Sounds like Van is all practiced up to gamble with cigarettes. Number 3. Getting paid to no-show. In a shocking display of incompetence, a group of 8 psychotherapists operating in the city managed to swindle over $600,000 from hard-working taxpayers. These so-called therapists, including a duo employed by the New York City Department of Education, were entrusted with a crucial task, providing essential therapy sessions to children in need through programs like the Early Intervention Program. However, instead of fulfilling their responsibilities, they chose to engage in a scam involving forged signatures, concocting false claims for sessions that were never conducted. The impact of their deceit was truly disheartening, as it resulted in approximately 200 vulnerable children being denied the vital treatments they deserved. This fraudulent scheme persisted for an astonishing length of time, spanning from around August 2012 to April 2018, magnifying the harm inflicted upon these innocent kids. Ironically, the downfall of these therapists stemmed from their lazy approach to covering up their crimes. Prompted by suspicious claims unearthed by the City Health Department, the police and FBI launched an investigation. Employing a variety of cross-referencing techniques, such as analyzing phone records, GPS data, and travel records, the investigators were able to quickly identify blatant inconsistencies. It became clear that the therapists were nowhere near the supposed locations where the therapy sessions were supposed to have taken place. The attempts at covering up their crimes weren't only feeble, but shockingly inept. One of the therapists, Kadera Doyle, submitted 2 invoices for simultaneous sessions with different children at separate locations. A clear impossibility. Additionally, she didn't even bother to attend either of the scheduled sessions. Two others, Patricia Hakim and Lyubov Belina, were caught red-handed, filing claims while they were out of the country on vacation. Bail amounts were set at significant sums, ranging from $100,000 to $150,000, underscoring the gravity of their offenses. This case will undoubtedly be remembered not for its intricate sophistication, but for its sheer laziness. The callous disregard displayed by these people, coupled with their weak attempts to cover their tracks, only sped up their downfall. With therapists like these, the kids were probably better off anyway. Number 2. The Vegas Maid. In a mind-boggling display of stupidity, Amanda Melendez, a hotel maid in Las Vegas, found herself in hot water after allegedly stealing over $1 million worth of belongings from a guest room. The incident unfolded at the Videra Hotel, where 3 men had requested housekeeping services. Imagine the shock on their faces when they entered the room, only to find their bags turned inside out, beds half made, and cleaning supplies carelessly abandoned. But that was just the beginning of their nightmare. The real blow came when they discovered that their meticulously hidden jewelry had vanished into thin air. We're talking about 2 Rolex watches, a Cartier watch, 7 diamond Cuban link chains, bracelets, and a gold ring, all gone without a trace. Adding insult to injury, another guest reported that $300 in cash had mysteriously vanished from the same room. How could this happen? Well, it turns out that Melendez, the housekeeper assigned to the room, had a rather incriminating phone conversation with an inmate in prison. And guess what? The conversation revolved around the valuable jewelry she encountered while cleaning the room. Talk about a criminal mastermind. Authorities wasted no time in apprehending Amanda, who now faces charges of grand larceny, burglary, and conspiracy to commit burglary. It's clear that her ill-conceived plan unraveled quickly, leaving her in a heap of trouble. One can't help but wonder how someone could be so foolish as to leave behind cleaning supplies and half-made beds and talk on recorded prison phone calls. Number 1. Pawning it off. Robert James Rowe, a 39-year-old man from Queensland, Australia, installed 7 security cameras at his friend's pawn shop. 6 years later, Rowe still had the capability to remotely control the surveillance system using his phone. Exploiting this advantage, he hatched a plan to break into the shop while the owner, Wayne McKellar, and his wife were vacationing in Bali. In November 2013, Rowe deactivated the camera covering the main section of the store, allowing him to enter undetected. Using the keypad he'd installed, Rowe gained access to the shop and made off with a significant haul of $6,300 in cash and jewelry. He thought he had outsmarted the remaining cameras. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Rowe even left a business card on the screen door, creating the illusion that he had just arrived at the locked store and decided to leave his contact information. Unbeknownst to him, Mrs. McKellar reviewed the CCTV footage and uncovered the evidence when she returned. While reviewing the video, Mrs. McKellar noticed the side door opening just minutes before Rowe placed his business card at the front door. She also observed a suspicious movement of a guitar stand near the location where the stolen items were kept. Following Mr. McKellar's identification of a blue plastic container from the shop in Rowe's car, the police promptly made an arrest. Rowe was ordered to pay $6,300 in compensation for his crimes. He was also sentenced to 12 months in prison. Maybe shut all the cameras off next time, Robert. What are some of the dumbest scams people try to pull? Let's get right into it with number 5. They got me locked up. Security van driver Andrew Meeser staged an elaborate fake robbery where he claimed he was locked up as robbers stole $1.1 million. Meeser alleged that the robbers handcuffed his hands to the van's steering wheel and that he had to use his nose to call the police. In response to the seemingly traumatic event, he claimed he developed such severe PTSD that he needed to take time off from work. During his time off, Meeser bragged to his friends that he was faking his PTSD. Meeser handcuffed himself to the van's steering wheel and placed shopping bags filled with cash. He waited 2 hours before raising the alarm about the staged robbery, calling a Loomis depot to claim he had been the victim of a robbery at 5 a.m. that morning. Meeser, with the help of his accomplice, Stefanos Kanteras, staged the scene and alleged that $1.1 million in banknotes and $18,193 in coins were stolen. It wasn't hard for law enforcement to detect something suspicious about Meezer's story, especially when he was bragging to his friends about the incident. Meezer faced conspiracy charges due to working with Canteras to stage a bogus crime scene. It was a severe charge confronting the fact that he attempted to pervert the course of justice by interfering with the investigation by lying to law enforcement and faking his PTSD. On the day of the alleged crime, Meezer parked his van and placed the bags of cash in the van's airlock. Then, a white Vohal combo pulled up, and two men got out to grab the bags. Meezer drove away, then parked and handcuffed himself to the steering wheel. When Meezer called for help, he alleged that a man with a gun approached him, handcuffed him to the steering wheel, and fled with the money. He also stated that he had been trying to get the attention of passersby, but nobody paid any attention to him. Meezer's phone records stored incriminating evidence, which the prosecution presented to the court during his conviction. They read texts where he bragged about milking the situation and talking about how much compensation he could receive if he kept up the act. Although Meezer denied his charges, he was convicted of conspiracy to steal and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. He was acquitted of conspiracy to conceal or transfer criminal property. First, Meezer was handcuffed to a truck. Now, he's handcuffed to a prison sentence. Number 4. She's not a keeper. Thelma Williams, an Ohio woman, took to social media to fake her own kidnapping in an attempt to catch her family's and her ex-boyfriend's attention after they recently ended their relationship. Williams tied herself up loosely to make it easy for her to escape, and she gagged herself with women's underwear. Hopefully, they were her own. After seeing Williams's photos and videos on Facebook, her friends panicked and called 911. They told the dispatcher that someone had kidnapped Williams and hacked her Facebook. Having expressed their fear that the kidnapper would endanger Williams, the 911 dispatcher triggered a full response from the police, which included a helicopter search and shutting down a highway costing thousands of dollars. Williams claimed on her Facebook that a man named Tony had taken over her account and threatened her. She posted as Tony, making graphic comments about how he planned to torture Williams. The problem was that Williams' story wasn't adding up. According to her Facebook, her kidnapper was holding Williams in her basement. However, a local McDonald's security camera caught footage of Williams in their location instead of being tied up in her basement. Williams was going through a hard breakup at the time of the incident. She struggled to deal with the emotional toll of the split and was seeking attention from her friends and family. At the time of her fake kidnapping, she claimed the intruder used her phone to record the incident and post it to her Facebook account. Williams posed as the kidnapper and posted a series of Facebook posts that caused her loved ones to be so concerned that they called the police. Authorities arrived at the scene where they found Williams in the basement, loosely tied up with her clothes. They noticed in some of her social media posts that she could be seen adjusting herself for the camera. After sending an emergency response team to Williams' home, detectives concluded that the incident was a fabrication. Sheriff Richard Jones expressed frustration with Williams' actions as they insult real victims of such crimes. Officers arrested Williams and charged her with making false alarms. She was held on a $10,000 bond. But on the flip side, she thought McDonald's crispy chicken sandwich was really good. Number 3. Meter Maid Lawyer. An Australian parking ranger scammed victims out of thousands of dollars by posing as Alex Stewart, a criminal and civil lawyer. Pinnock purchased a fake law degree online and used it to lure clients. It wasn't just his clients that Pinnock convinced of his second identity. Pinnock believed he was actually Alex Stewart, likely due to his schizophrenia diagnosis. His fake qualifications helped him gain employment in Victoria and South Australia. Pinnock created a website and social media accounts to promote Stewart's services, describing himself as an unconventional solicitor who would make a difference in his clients' lives. Pinnock claimed to have 50 clients in 3 states, representing them in civil and criminal cases. Additionally, he alleged to have dealt with $1 million in money awarded and fees to those clients. While his victims paid him thousands of dollars for representation, he put the money toward a lavish lifestyle, including flying around Australia multiple times a week, driving a BMW, and staying in high-end hotels. Pinnock's fake law degree came from Charleston State University in South Carolina, but he actually purchased it from a shady website that offers fraudulent degrees for life experience. Before starting his legal career, Pinnock worked as a parking ranger in Sydney. His daily tasks included issuing penalties for illegal parking and breaches of council regulations, which was very different from his work as Stewart. Rather than posing as Stewart, Pinnock believed he was Stewart. He genuinely thought he provided helpful legal services to his clients and portrayed himself as a lawyer even after the Law Society of NSW charged him. Pinnock's world unraveled, and he became homeless after being exposed for his crimes. No matter his mental state, Pinnock was very deceptive with his clients. He would present them with a series of fake documents, such as a counterfeit Australian practicing certificate and a fake certificate of fitness and good standing. Pinnock also never had his law degree validated, and the website where he obtained it didn't provide any study or verifications, leaning on life and job experience instead. Still, Pinnock's lack of studying didn't stop him from taking to Facebook to brag about his legal services and the lifestyle they afforded him. He would post updates detailing false courtroom deals and talk about how much he loved his job. His victims were the ones supporting his lavish expenses. One of his victims, Yvonne Borg, paid Pinnock $7,500 to represent her in a case against her local government, which fined her $49,000 over an illegal shed. Another victim, Steve Wiseman, paid Pinnock $3,380 to represent him after Wiseman found out a piece of land he owned was being used as an illegal dumping ground. His victims weren't wealthy and often had to borrow money to afford Pinnock, who advertised himself as a lawyer who would fight for their rights over anything else. The Law Society of New South Wales eventually uncovered Pinnock's elaborate scheme and charged him with engaging in legal practice without being qualified. Pinnock pleaded guilty and was fined $3,500 and given a community corrections order instead of serving jail time. He's like that guy on Split, except his dangerous personality gives bad legal advice while his other just gives you annoying parking tickets. Number 2. Numbers Game. Teenager Dennis Sue from Sydney, Australia, used stolen personal information to demand money via text messages. Sue gained access to the personal information of Optus customers who were victims of a massive data breach in September 2022. He sent texts to 93 Optus customers, demanding them to transfer $2,000 into an account he controlled. When authorities learned of Sue's attempted blackmail, they charged him with using a telecommunications network with the intent to commit a serious offense and dealing with identification information. The charges carried hefty fees and high prison sentences with a maximum combined sentence of 17 years. Optus is an Australian telecommunications company that provides mobile, broadband, and television services. It has over 10 million customers and is the second largest telecommunications provider in the country. The company experienced a devastating data breach in September 2022 when a cyber attack from unknown hackers stole customers' personal information, like their names, dates of birth, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, and financial information such as credit card detail. Although Optus warned those affected by the breach to protect their personal information, hackers posted the stolen data online, making it available to the public. Sue used the data to identify the customers from the breach and attempted to use the victim's information to blackmail them into sending him money. He sent a series of text messages demanding $2,000 to 93 Optus customers and threatened to expose the victim's personal information if they didn't comply. None of the text receipts sent him money, and the Australian Federal Police promptly tracked down Sue and arrested him. Sue wanted the money routed to a bank account that belonged to his 15-year-old brother, potentially to disguise the source of the funds and avoid detection. It wasn't effective. Unfortunately for Sue, running such an unsophisticated scam made it almost impossible to avoid detection. Instead of paying his ransom, his targeted victims reported his texts to authorities. On November 8, 2022, the prosecution withdrew the charges of dealing with identity information to commit an indictable offense and demand with menace intending to obtain gain. In December 2022, Sue pleaded guilty to 2 counts of using equipment connected to a network to commit a serious offense. His lawyer argued that Sue's crimes resulted from his depression and anxiety stemming from a difficult childhood. However, the judge noted that Sue's actions caused significant harm to the victims and that blackmail is too serious an offense not to receive receive any form of punishment. The judge sentenced Sue to an 18-month community corrections program and 100 hours of community service. Sue publicly apologized outside of court after his hearing. Number 1. Like a rolling stone. In an attempt to collect injury money, a man in Hong Kong flexed his acting skills by dramatically pretending to be hit by a car. The absurd spectacle drew 155,000 views on Twitter, where viewers were unconvinced by his performance. He planned on staging the accident to receive injury money and was a type of scam referred to as porcelain, as they're so fragile they collapse at the slightest touch. The footage, filmed from the driver's dash cam, showed the driver turning a corner where she encountered the man sprinting toward her vehicle. When she saw him, she put her foot on the brake and slowed to a stop. The man jumped off the hood and rolled off before stumbling away. His performance was far from over. He dropped to the ground and rolled all over the road like a small, overacting child. It was weird. He didn't break character until paramedics arrived at the scene and walked toward him. Suddenly, his seemingly agonizing injuries were miraculously cured, and he sprinted away from the scene in case the paramedics saw through his performance. After all, he did spend an entire minute theatrically rolling on the concrete, writhing in fake pain, in a move that probably reminded many people of how soccer players dramatically flop to the ground during a match. What are some of the most hopeless and dumbest scams out there? Let's go ahead and get right into it and start out with number 7. Let's blow $1 million. The ringleader of a hacking scheme bought a woman's bank details and used her data to drain her account out of her life savings. Rilwan Oshadi spent $3,800 of Karim Boudreaux's account details and gained access to her $1.2 million life savings. Tamir Abdulhamid, an Egyptian hacker, convinced Boudreaux to give him the details of her Santander account as part of a phishing scam. Once he had her information, he sold it to Oshodi. Oshodi's girlfriend, Annette Jabeth, withdrew Boudreaux's savings while pretending to be Boudreaux. In January 2012, they went on a 3-day shopping spree, spending Boudreaux's money on top-of-the-line computers, expensive bottles of champagne, and obviously, cheeseburgers. Oshodi also spent $1,400 on taxis, gold, and an iPhone. He even took a picture of Nigerian cash sandwiched between 2 slices of bread, likely when he realized it was cheaper to eat that way than to go to Five Guys. But Oshodi claimed he couldn't even afford his lawyers when the time came to pay the money back. Authorities found out about the crime and arrested Oshodi. He faced 2 counts of conspiracy to defraud and conspiracy to conceal property. In 2013, he received an 8-year sentence after being found guilty of all charges. During his trial, Oshodi claimed he never made any money from the scam. The judge didn't believe him, considering he'd literally cleaned out a bank account. The judge suspected Oshodi had likely hidden assets overseas. In the scam, Oshodi made roughly $1.15 million, and the judge ordered him to repay the entire sum within 6 months. If he couldn't pay, he would face 4 more years of jail time. Abdulhamid also received a 6-year sentence after admitting to 3 counts of conspiracy to defraud, but was ordered to pay back only $825 of the $89,000 he made. Not a bad rate. When authorities raided Oshodi's home, they found the details of 11,000 credit cards, 8,500 of which came from UK customers. Santander repaid Boudreaux in full for the money she lost, although she admitted to feeling traumatized and violated over the whole ordeal. Oshodi's girlfriend and 5 others were also jailed for their involvement in the scheme. Number 6. Don't forget the cheese. In 2021, an unnamed pair of thieves stole 45 bottles of wine, including a bottle worth $537,815 from an upscale restaurant and hotel complex in Spain. Atrio, a 2 Michigan-star restaurant and hotel complex, housed 40,000 bottles in its cellar. Among them were rare and hard-to-find bottles that the owners had accumulated. For their heist, the couple presented themselves as refined vacationers staying at the hotel. After they had finished their meal, they asked the front desk desk clerk for more food. While he was in the kitchen, one of the suspects snuck into the cellar. The pair then checked out in the early morning, taking bags full of bottles on their way out. The bottles in their stash included an 1806 Chateau de Yquem and at least 6 19th century bottles from Romani Conti, an exclusive winemaker in the Burgundy region of France. They only took irreplaceable bottles, making it evident that they were working on behalf of a private wine collector. The wines couldn't be sold on the open market since they are very traceable. Centuries-old wines are hot commodities amongst wine collectors. Atrio's co-owner and sommelier, Jose Polo, even said he would buy back the collection from the robbers. The bottles they stole were worth over 1 million euros. If the thieves wanted to make money on the bottles they stole, they might have taken him up on his offer. Vintages as old as the ones they took would be challenging to sell as they were all numbered. Of course, while selling the bottles might have been difficult, it wouldn't be impossible. One way would be to slip them into a larger collection that's being sold and then hide their provenance amongst similar bottles. A buyer that isn't well prepared may not notice. Atrio insured their collection, but they were far more concerned with losing irreplaceable wines than they were about the money, leaving the owners devastated. 9 months later, Croatian border guards recognized the couple and arrested them on their way to Montenegro. Spanish police teamed with authorities in the Netherlands, Croatia, and Romania and involved Interpol in catching the pair. Their identities hadn't been identified pending formal charges being filed. The stolen wine was not recovered, but an ongoing investigation was in place to find it. Authorities did a great job apprehending the pair. Number 5. Snapchat Me That. A former winner of the Euro Millions lottery ran a Snapchat scam that cost his victims tens of thousands of dollars. Reese Casey loved to gamble. In 2018, he won roughly $65,000 from popular British betting firm William Hill, and later that year gained around $197,000 as part of the jackpot for Euro Millions. Reese's winnings fed his gambling addiction, so the money didn't stay in his candy jar for very long. He tried to find ways to stop himself from throwing his money away, but was unsuccessful. Soon, he lost it all, and with his life in pieces, he needed to find a way to make more. Reese claimed he could give people a 40% discount from the luxury clothing company Flannels, as he had a friend that worked there. He used Snapchat to put the offer out, and 25 people quickly responded. People sent thousands of pounds to Casey. One woman sent roughly $5,400, and another even used part of her mother's inheritance to purchase the goods through him. Overall, Reese gambled away about $40,965 of other people's money. In court, he was surprised by the number of defendants that came forward, claiming that he only knew of 3 people affected by his scheme. Reese was extremely remorseful for his actions, admitting that he had begun gambling when he was 15 years old. Since then, he tried to find ways to curb his addiction, but it was like he was stuck in a big cup of peanut butter, unable to make a fast breakout. Reese pleaded guilty to fraud and received a 12-month prison sentence. Looks like he should have taken 5 before going through with this scam. Number 4. Orchestrated. In December 2022, the former director of finance for New York University, Cindy Tapp, faced charges for diverting state funding to her fake business accounts. Tapp allegedly embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from New York Education Department grants into shell companies over 6 years. She put the money towards an $80,000 pool, other renovations in her Connecticut home, and personal expenses. Tapp's fraudulent behavior started with a $23 million grant awarded to NYU's Metropolitan Center for Research on Equity and Transformation. It was the department where Tapp worked, and the cash was supposed to go to state programs to help special education students and not as special education students learn English. A portion of the funds needed to go towards minority or women-owned businesses. Sneaky Cindy allegedly had 3 such subcontractors that she arranged to receive some of the grant, which totaled $3.5 million. From there, Tapp allegedly faked invoices to be signed, each on a company letterhead. This allowed her to funnel most of the cash to the 2 shell companies she created for her scheme. In 2018, a program director at the university confronted Tapp about the payments. Tapp responded by cryptically saying that she had strong working relationships with the companies listed and that she couldn't find any other companies that offered the same services with the price. NYU reported the theft, which eventually found its way to the district attorney. The education community was outraged when services that were supposed to go to multilingual learners earners and students with disabilities were instead likely put towards Tap's home. Tap diverted over $660,000 in state funds to her shell companies. During her hearing in the Manhattan Supreme Court, she pleaded not guilty to her long list of charges, which included money laundering, grand larceny, offering a false instrument, and falsifying business records. Number 3. Tinder date gone wrong. A man was robbed of thousands of dollars when he went to meet his Tinder date at a hotel. The victim matched with a woman named Sonia on Tinder and planned to meet her at the Embassy Suites Hotel in Phoenix. Sure, he was totally there for a date. When he arrived, an extra person apparently also wanted to be on the date and welcomed him into the room with a gun. Jose Sandoval Yaquez, along with Crystal Hulsey, pointed the gun at the man who was probably there to read Bible verses and forced him to hand over his cell phone and other belongings. Yaquez made the victim give up his ID cards, PIN codes, bank account, and social media information. They took the victim outside and made him drive them to a Chase bank. While in the car, they kept the gun pointed at his head and gave instructions to withdraw $900 from Chase Bank from the drive-thru. At that point, they had already taken $3,000 from his account. However, police caught on to the easily identified couple because they had used their real names when checking into the hotel and pulling money from the victim's account. The couple then stole his car and drove it from Phoenix to California and then to Las Vegas. Yaquez and Hulsey caught the attention of police officers when they reached Las Vegas, who pulled them over. After a brief chase, the couple ditched the car and fled on foot, evading the police and somehow catching a ride back to Phoenix. When the victim's car was found, it had the gun inside. Phoenix police found an escort ad that matched Hulsey's number and arranged to meet the woman. She arrived in her car with Yaquez, but when police tried to arrest them, they escaped again. Officers followed them, and during the high-speed chase, they carjacked another car and attempted to flee again. The couple should have known that after playing GTA that once the police have 5 stars, you're not getting away. Eventually, they collided with another vehicle, having been driving on the wrong side of the highway. They tried again to steal another car, but the police caught them and took them into custody. They were arrested in October 2022 and both faced serious charges. Number 2. Show Me The Invoice. Private jet travel broker William Boos was believed to have stolen more than $4 million from his clients. Boos worked with high-profile clients, including a big Apple TV journalist and a major international consulting firm. Boos was responsible for booking flights on behalf of his clients, although he found a way to make a little extra money at their expense. Between 2017 and 2020, Boos allegedly charged clients for flights they didn't request or take and charged other clients for flights they'd already paid for or taken. Over a 3-year period, Boos charged over $3 million to an international consulting firm's American Express credit card for flights the firm's employees never took or requested. He charged unauthorized charter flights to a Manhattan art gallery's American Express account. The gallery saw the travel charges, but Boos told them it was an error and that he would send them a refund. Boos then sent the gallery 24 documents that showed the refunds into the account, but they were phony baloney. A big Apple-based TV reporter was allegedly scammed out of $63,000 after Boos sent 2 fraudulent contracts to the journalist to the private charter plane company that he brokered for a flight. In November 2022, Boos' scheme came crashing down when he was arrested and pleaded not guilty to grand larceny that's apparently quite spectacular, and criminal possession of a forged instrument. He posted his $500,000 bail and will appear in court in March 2023. Number 1. Oh, they definitely knew. A mistake on a cryptocurrency website turned an Australian couple into instant millionaires, but soon they would learn the repercussions of spending money that wasn't theirs. Theva Manogari Manaval and Jatinder Singh were supposed to receive a $100 refund from the website Crypto.com. The employee processing the request made an oopsie, and instead of sending them $100, sent them $10 million. We guess the zero key was stuck? After suddenly seeing the amount of money in their accounts, the couple quickly developed a taste for the finer things in life. They bought 4 houses, including a $1.2 million luxury home, gave handouts of hundreds of thousands of dollars to each of Manaval's daughters, bought a $70,000 car, and gave a friend $1.2 million to pay off his mortgage. The rest went towards luxury items, furniture, and art. It took the company 7 months to realize their mistake, and by that point, the couple had blown through a considerable chunk of the money. Singh said that he thought he'd won some sort of Crypto.com contest, but Crypto.com's compliance officer asserted that no such competition existed. Manavel diverted some of the funds to her sister, Dilagathati Gangatori, and tried to flee Malaysia. Police arrested her at Melbourne Airport, where she had a one-way ticket out of the country. Manavel also transferred the ownership of their $1.35 million Melbourne home to her sister, who lived in Malaysia. Crypto.com's attorneys tried to serve Gangadori freezing orders, but were unsuccessful. She never responded to their emails, and the only communication they had was with Manavel's lawyers, who sent an email response to say they received the orders. They told Crypto.com that Gangadori would be looking for legal counsel instead. Crypto.com won a default judgment that ordered her to sell the property immediately. The money from the sale would go to Crypto.com and an additional $27,369 in interest. Manavel and Singh faced charges of theft, and Manavel faced the additional charge of negligently dealing with the proceeds of crime. Both pleaded not guilty, and the judge sent their case to trial. They will appear in court again in March 2023. Crypto.com also took civil action against Manavel in the Supreme Court. She has only paid back a portion of the money she stole, with $3 million still missing. Just how does a tragedy bring out scammers from everywhere? In the early hours of June 14, 2017, a devastating fire engulfed the 23-story residential block tower, Grenfell Tower, making it one of the UK's worst disasters. The fire originated in a refrigerator on the 4th floor, waking up the occupant. He contacted the fire department, and they arrived minutes later. However, the flames had already started spreading rapidly and were surging up the tower's exterior. Compounding the tragedy was the stay put policy, which was intended to contain a fire to a single unit. Residents were instructed to remain in their apartments, unaware that the fire would spread. As smoke filled the narrow stairwell, many became trapped, unable to escape the thick fumes. The fire's rapid spread was partially due to the presence of external cladding, a significant component of Grenfell Tower's refurbishment. The cladding, consisting of aluminum sheets bonded to a central polyethylene core, played a central role in the fire spread. The material, highly combustible, melted and dripped, releasing a tremendous amount of energy. The victims of the Grenfell Tower fire spanned a wide range of ages and backgrounds. They included entire families, such as the Shakir and Hashim families, who resided on the upper floors, and the El Wahhabi family on the 21st floor. The youngest victim was 6-month-old Lena Belkadi, who tragically perished in her mother's arms. The oldest victim, Sheila, an 84-year-old resident, had lived there for 34 years. 77 people perished in the blaze. In the aftermath of the fire, the Grenfell Tower Fund was established to provide assistance to survivors, the bereaved, and the local community. Initially, grants totaling £5.2 million were distributed to aid those affected by the fire. Over the subsequent years, additional funds amounted to £1.8 million were allocated to support local organizations and projects aimed at rebuilding and revitalizing the community. But even with a tragic event such as this one, it still brought out all the scammers. As of March 2020, there have been 21 people charged with fraud in relation to the tower fire. Let's get started with number 14, Abagi Anafi and Kofi Kaku. Abagi Anafi and Kofi Kaku each crafted their own schemes with calculated precision, but they both claimed some relationship to the same victim. Anafi fervently maintained that his beloved sister was Zainab Deen. She and her young son tragically lost their lives in the flames that devoured the tower on that fateful early morning. He claimed to have been present amidst the chaos, personally grappling with the horrifying ordeal. But as the layers of truth were peeled away, a contrasting reality emerged. Apparently, Anafi was nowhere even near the vicinity of Grenfell Tower when the inferno started. Actually, he was in the comfort of a hotel during the blaze and had no relation whatsoever to Dean. But he still was able to get his hands on relief money. So, with all that cash in hand, Anafi indulged in shopping excursions at high-end stores like Harrods and Knightsbridge, as well as taking vacations and renting sports cars. He bragged on social media about things like his 245-pound slippers, while the Grenfell community continued to grapple with the weight of loss and suffering. However, the threads of Anafi's fabrications were finally unraveled when his cell phone records were examined. These digital footprints revealed the truth, exposing a trail of movements between various accommodations, such as hotels and hostels, during the time frame he vehemently professed his presence at Grenfell Tower. This revelation painted a portrait of a man who only cared about what he could get, exploiting the genuine suffering of victims and survivors for personal gain. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the true magnitude of Anafi's deceit came into light. The proceedings descended into disarray as his first lawyer quit due to the professional embarrassment, whatever that means, and his lies started to crumble under scrutiny. Anafi eventually admitted that his story was fake, but that it was only because he was hallucinating as a result of a fast when talking to police, and therefore unintentional. He then claimed that he was a model of the community, despite evidence of opening a new bank account registered to an address in the tower to get his hands on the money. The jury didn't buy what he was selling either, choosing to jail Anafi for 5 years for his stolen £35,000. Kofi Kwaku's actions bore striking similarities to Anafi's. Kwaku, a former hospital worker, fabricated claims regarding his relationship to Zainab Dean, asserting that they shared a dwelling in apartment 115 of Grenfell Tower. However, his narrative deviated slightly from Anafi's, highlighting a romantic connection instead of a sibling bond. Kwaku cunningly managed to swindle £30,000 in handouts from the Grenfell Victim Fund by peddling false information about his living arrangement. He insisted he had been overseas in Ivory Coast when the fire ravaged the tower, watching the events unfold on TV. However, his alibi crumbled when flight manifests revealed that he had actually returned to the UK before the tragic incident occurred. Kwaku's plea and subsequent sentencing mirrored the gravity of his actions. Given the extent of his fraudulent behavior, the court acknowledged the need for a substantial sentence, and he was given 4 years. Number 13. Nguyen. Nguyen, a Vietnam-born serial fraudster, fabricated a heart-wrenching story claiming that his wife and son had perished in the devastating blaze. The audacity of his deception reached new heights when he shook hands with Prince Charles during his visit to a relief center. Nguyen's manipulation earned him a staggering £12,500 from charities and the Kensington and Chelsea Council. While Nguyen's criminal past, consisting of 17 aliases and 28 previous convictions, hinted at his propensity for fraud, it was his calculated exploitation of the tragedy that left the nation appalled. Taking advantage of the generosity of well-meaning volunteers, Nguyen received food, shelter, and financial assistance by falsely posing as a victim. Adding to the brazenness of his scheme, Nguyen sought the spotlight by appearing on television and sharing his harrowing tale of escape from the tower. He claimed to have lost everything, including his passport and identification. To further solidify his deceit, he even expressed his desire to bring family members from Hong Kong for the funerals of his purported wife and son. What made Nguyen's actions even more reprehensible was the fact that he embarked on his fraudulent scheme while on conditional release for a previous offense. His disregard for the law and the suffering of genuine victims was evident, as he callously diverted resources and attention away from those in dire need. During the trial, Nguyen's defense lawyer argued that his client had an exceptionally low IQ and suffered from untreated post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and limited empathy. However, these factors didn't absolve Nguyen for his responsibility of the deliberate exploitation of a tragedy for personal gain. Consequently, he was sentenced to 21 months in prison by Judge Philip Bartle, who denounced Nguyen's actions as contemptible. Number 12. MuhammadSED Rinku. Syed Rinku, a Bangladeshi illegal immigrant, stooped to unimaginable depths by fabricating a love affair with a male victim of the Grenfell Tower fire. His ploy aimed to not only defraud the disaster fund, but also secure his stay in the UK. Rinku's lies were uncovered when authorities questioned him about the alleged relationship. They discovered that he had meticulously researched the identities of those who had perished in the tragic blaze in order to pull off his con. The revelation of romantic videos with women and his use of dating apps looking for women on his phone further exposed his fraudulent scheme. As part of his deceit, Rinku managed to obtain a prepaid credit card funded by the disaster fund and spent a total of £5,070. Moreover, he received medical assistance from the NHS that was meant for genuine survivors of the fire, exploiting the policy created by the authorities, which aimed to assist individuals with insecure immigration status who had lost their homes. Rinku also sought to regularize his stay in the UK. Judge Nicholas Wood Good condemned Rinku's actions as despicable, beyond contempt, and beneath criticism before sentencing him to 18 months. Rinku's previous good character served as the sole mitigating factor, and while the judge acknowledged his apologies, it remained uncertain whether they would be accepted by others. Alongside his prison sentence, Rinku was ordered to pay £4,044 in compensation to the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Number 11. Elaine Douglas and Tommy Brooks. Elaine Douglas and Tommy Brooks, both 51, claimed money intended for victims of the fire, despite not being affected by it. The most ridiculous aspect of this case is that the apartment they claimed to have lived in during the fire didn't even exist. It's, of course, a despicable act to exploit a tragedy for personal gain, especially when so many people genuinely suffered and lost their lives. Furthermore, Douglas and Brooks also attempted to take advantage of the immigration policy introduced after the fire, which allowed residents who lost their homes to regularize their stay in the country. The couple claimed to have been residing in Grenfell Tower and were granted leave to remain for 5 years. Elaine Douglas stayed at the Radisson Blu in Kensington for 276 nights, costing the council over £55,000. She also accumulated charges of over £11,000 on a prepaid credit card provided to her after she had the nerve to complain about the food in the hotel. Brooks, on the other hand, spent 243 nights in hotel accommodations, amounting to more than £49,000. The guilty pleas from both defendants at Isleworth Crown Court highlight their actions, earning them 3 years apiece. Number 10. Joyce Saryi. Joyce Saryi claimed she had escaped the fire and had tragically lost her husband. However, it was revealed that she was single and living miles away. Her ruse involved various schemes, including claiming her sister-in-law had also perished in the blaze and getting a vulnerable man to pretend to be her husband, who was found miraculously living in a cave being fed by tourists. Saryi's story raised suspicions from the start when she was unable to provide specific details about her apartment number in the tower. Saryi also requested new caseworkers whenever she was questioned about her story, further complicating the investigation. Saryi took advantage of the situation by accumulating a vast amount of donations, literally filling a room at a Hilton hotel with the gifts and donations. As she received more support and material possessions, Saryi's attitude shifted and she became more confident and demanding. Her lies escalated, including fabricating stories about her husband and sister-in-law passing and pretending to recognize them in a video of the victims. Saryi couldn't resist the temptation of indulging in room service, ordering 3 meals when her social worker paid a visit. The third guest she claimed was living with her in the room was nothing more than a figment of her imagination. Saryi was also itching to snatch a new smartphone from the disaster fund. Even though she already had 3 phones, Joyce had the audacity to claim that she was merely holding one for a relative. And when she finally did get the new iPhone, her attitude improved to the point that care workers instantly became suspicious. The disaster fund's offer of free taxi rides also proved to be irresistible to Saryi. So she shamelessly used the service, treating it like her personal Uber. She even managed to accumulate a staggering £160 fare for a single ride. Her justification? She claimed that her traumatic experiences left her too stressed to utilize public transportation. Saryi had also portrayed herself as a qualified nurse, showcasing her alleged expertise in all things medical. However, upon closer examination, there was no concrete evidence to support her claim of having any occupation other than that of a heartless swindler. During the day of her trial, Saryi put on a perplexing act, pretending to be bewildered and spouting gibberish, which must have been crazy to see in person. She claimed that she couldn't enter pleas because she couldn't comprehend basic English words. Joyce also mastered the art of fabricating an extensive range of conditions, diseases, and ailments. One moment she was struck by sudden paralysis, confining her to a wheelchair, and the next, she said she was partially blind. While in custody, Saryi said she couldn't eat or swallow, only for staff to discover empty food containers in her room. Saryi was found guilty of multiple fraud charges, including defrauding the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, Hilton Hotel, and charities. She was also charged with possessing a false document and was sentenced to 4.5 years. Number 9. Mohammed Gamuta. Muhammad Gamuta claimed that his own father had passed away in the devastating blaze. He used his supposed tragedy as a means to secure a free hotel stay and some cash. Gamuta's plan aimed to net nearly £7,000, but he ended up only getting a mere £500 in cash, £910 in hotel bills, and £374 in room service expenses. Gamuta told the council officials that he had been residing with his father on the 24th floor when the inferno engulfed the building. Exploiting the press coverage and the name of a deceased victim, Abdel Salam, Gamuta claimed that Mr. Salam was his father, but Salam had no connection to Gamuta at all. Police discovered when they interviewed Salam's grieving son while investigating the fraud. Gamuta pled guilty to 2 counts of fraud in London's Isleworth Crown Court, and he was met with a just punishment, 18-month jail sentence. Number 8. Shareef Ali. Shareef Ali, branded as the worst Grenfell fraudster, claimed £103,000 in benefits meant for victims of the tragedy. Ali masqueraded as a resident of Grenfell Tower's 21st floor alongside a family of 5 with whom he had very little connection. Through this fraud, Ali secured £300 per week, food expenses, and enjoyed the comforts of 3 different hotels, all generously covered by the disaster fund. But his unruly behavior and blatant disregard for rules eventually got him kicked out of the 2 hotels. Elouabi's claim not only betrayed the trust of the community, but also caused further anguish for the genuine victims. He attempted to exploit the outpouring of sympathy and support that followed the tragedy, aiming to secure payment, property advantages, and financial benefits totaling £100,000. In his claim, Elouabi said that he was living with the El-Wahabi family, including Yassin El-Wahabi, 20, and his father, Abdulaziz El-Wahabi, 52, both of whom tragically lost their lives. However, Elouabi had no direct familial connection to them, despite knowing one of the children. Elouabi told council workers that he was outside the tower breaking his Ramadan fast at the time of the blaze, and that he tried to get back inside the tower while it was on fire, but was stopped by police. Moreover, Elouabi's criminal past was marked by a previous conviction in 2005 for possessing stolen pictures of Will Young in drag, which he planned to sell to the press. This history of exploiting opportunities for personal gain showed his relentless pursuit of the illicit profits, regardless of the consequences. In total, he had 28 prior convictions. Judge Robinson Johnson, in delivering the sentence, condemned his attempt to enrich himself while others were still grappling with the aftermath of the tragedy. The judge highlighted the immense pain suffered by the victim's family and friends, emphasizing that such profound loss and grief cannot be understood by those not directly affected. Elouabi was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Number 7. Abdel Karim Rakaya. Abdel Karim Rakaya, a Tunisian illegal immigrant, swindled £88,000 from the Grenfell Fund. He claimed to be a victim of the fire and took advantage of the policy of granting amnesty to migrants affected by the disaster. Rakaya initially said that he had been staying in apartment 4, but later changed the story, claiming he had been sleeping in the stairwell. His scheme began at the Westway Support Center, where he sought assistance and portrayed himself as a survivor. He was provided with 209 nights of emergency hotel accommodation at Park Plaza County Hotel, costing a staggering £60,401. Following that, Rakaya was given a studio apartment in Chelsea for 6 months, which amounted to £15,895, including £3,166 worth of furniture, electrical goods, and bills. He also received additional payments totaling £11,885, along with monthly travel cards. The audacity of Rakaya's story became clear when he actually inquired whether his Netflix subscription was covered by the funds. When a housing officer raised suspicions about Rakaya's claim, he threatened legal action to intimidate the council into continuing to pay while an investigation was conducted. But the truth finally came to light, and Rakaya was arrested at his home, where £2,000 in cash was discovered. In court, Rakaya admitted to fraud by false representation and obtaining leave to stay in the country through deception. His defense claimed that he had experienced trauma and turned to alcohol and illegal substances since arriving in the UK. They also argued that witnessing the Grenfell Tower from the outside of the building had left him traumatized. The judge condemned Rakaya for exploiting the situation and sentenced him to 4.5 years in prison. Number 6. Antonio Guva. Antonio Guva was a cleaner who claimed he was residing in a flat with an elderly woman. However, this turned out to be a complete fabrication. Guva pocketed over £53,000 and resided in a luxurious hotel in Marylebone, paying £155 per night for a staggering 289 days. Not only did he enjoy lavish accommodations, but he also took cash handouts and food. Additionally, he stayed at another hotel, which cost £44,795 and obtained money and a free laptop from a charity. During the court proceedings, Guva pleaded guilty to 2 counts of fraud by false representation. His lawyer said that Guva had been homeless for 8 months before the fire and argued that his actions were driven by desperation. According to her, he wasn't a hardened criminal, but a desperate individual. Nevertheless, the judge denounced Guvia's behavior, highlighting the profound sympathy and genuine concern demonstrated by most people in the aftermath of the Grenfell tragedy. Guva was sentenced to 3 years and 2 months in prison. Number 5. Daniel Steventon. Daniel Steventon claimed that he resided in the tower with a genuine tenant who tragically perished in the devastating blaze. He said that he'd been made homeless by the fire and sought various forms of support, including housing, services, and financial assistance, totaling £75,225. While the fire was happening, Steventon was working as a pharmacist technician at a hospital in West London. During the period of his bogus claims, he resided in the comfort of the Mercure Kensington Hotel, with all expenses paid for by the Kensington and Chelsea Council. Steventon received £54,099 for hotel costs, £14,310 as a food allowance, and an additional £6,876 in bank payments, totaling £75,285 between August 2017 and May 2018. What's interesting is that nobody that lived in the tower had ever seen or heard of him. Daniel was eventually sentenced to 3 years and 6 months in prison. However, the scars left behind will forever stain the grieving process and remind the victims of the lengths some would go to exploit their pain. Number 4. Jenny McDonough. Jenny McDonough was a senior finance officer for the charity organization dedicated to assisting victims of the fire and thus was entrusted with a great responsibility. However, she used her position to steal a staggering amount of money, leaving her victims devastated and questioning the very system that was meant to support them. Over the course of several years, McDonough managed to steal an estimated £62,000 from the funds allocated for the victims of the tragedy. Instead of fulfilling her duty to aid these victims, McDonough heartlessly took advantage of their misfortune and further deepen their suffering. That makes McDonough's actions all the more outrageous is how she spent the stolen money. Rather than quietly enjoying the ill-gotten gains or making subtle lifestyle upgrades, she indulged in extravagance that bordered on the absurd. Reports reveal that McDonough spent a significant portion of the stolen funds on luxurious vacations, including flights to Paris, Reykjavik, Los Angeles, and Dubai. She also spent £32,000 of the stolen money gambling and lost around $16,000. Her reckless choices demonstrated a complete lack of empathy and an appalling disregard for the lives meant to be assisting. Adding to the shocking nature of McDonough's betrayal was her complete disregard for the consequences of her actions. When confronted with the evidence of her fraudulent activities, she was advised to resign from her position. However, she callously ignored this advice and continued her criminal behavior. In a deeply disturbing turn of events, McDonough even stooped so low as to steal prepaid cards intended for the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire. Astonishingly, she recharged one victim's card 17 times, allowing more than £50,000 to flow through that account. Even after her arrest on August 1st, McDonough persisted in using another remaining credit card to continue her reckless spending spree. McDonough indulged in a series of extravagant purchases that boggle the mind. Beyond luxurious vacations, her extravagant taste led her to splurge over £500 at high-end hair salons, £185 on a pair of Ralph Lauren glasses, and even squandered £110 at a lavish lobster restaurant. Perhaps the most astounding aspect of McDonough's scheme was its sheer sloppiness. Despite her intentions to remain undetected, she displayed a stunning lack of foresight and attention to detail. Her activities left a clear trail of evidence that ultimately led to her downfall. McDonough underestimated the diligence of her colleagues and the auditors responsible for monitoring the charity's finances. Her actions weren't only morally reprehensible, but also highlighted her arrogance and poor judgment. Thankfully, justice prevailed in the case of Jenny McDonough. Following a thorough investigation, she was charged with fraud, forgery, and theft. In 2018, McDonough pleaded guilty to her crimes and was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. Number 3. Derek Peters. Derek Peters claimed he lost his friend and all his possessions in the fire. He managed to get a room at the Park Grand Hotel in Paddington, where, during his stay, he ran up a bill of £40,000 and spent more than £5,000 on food, drinks, and laundry. However, Peters' criminal activities didn't end there. Derek was arrested for burglary, having stolen valuable items, including a tag watch, jewelry, a passport, an Apple laptop, and a Bose speaker from a neighboring apartment. Yet somehow, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea continued to pay for his hotel room while he was incarcerated. Even then, Peters managed to manipulate the judge during his sentencing. The sympathetic judge, moved by the supposed tragedy Peters had endured, spared him a prison sentence. This leniency allowed Peters to continue his deception and even led to him being offered an apartment. Ultimately, the truth caught up with Peters when a Grenfell survivor, Rebecca Ross, confirmed that he had never resided with her or her family as he had claimed. Further investigation into Peters' background revealed a long rap sheet with 40 convictions for 90 offenses, including 24 counts of fraud and 73 counts of theft. His history painted a picture of a cold criminal who repeatedly took advantage of others. As a result of his crimes, Peters was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Additionally, Peters was resentenced for the burglary charge, facing the consequences of both his fraudulent claims and his criminal activity. Number 2. Yonatan Eob. Yonatan Eob, a young man who described himself as homeless but used an address in Notting Hill, West London, took advantage of the tragedy to get rich. Eob's deceit involved receiving substantial funds and accommodations meant for the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire. He was provided with a hotel room, a food allowance, and prepaid cards totaling almost £87,000. However, his fraudulent activities didn't stop there. When authorities searched his hotel room, they discovered illegal substances as well as 7 mobile phones, approximately £3,000 in cash, designer clothes, jewelry, and credit card. It became apparent that Eob wasn't only involved in fraudulent claims, but also engaged in dealing. Eob's claim was centered around how he allegedly lived with a friend in apartment 182, a residence that tragically housed a family of 5 who all perished in the fire. He was granted emergency accommodation at the Holland Park Hilton between July 2017 and June 2018, during which time he made various complaints. Eob brazenly requested more money, claiming difficulty in consuming the food provided at the hotel. Additionally, he complained about the hotel's Wi-Fi signal, stating that it hindered his ability to study. These complaints were made despite Eob's illicit activities and the luxury he was enjoying, including the use of a white convertible Mercedes. Eob's fraudulent activities were exposed when authorities found incriminating evidence in his hotel room, including dealing-related text messages and a list of names and numbers. The court recognized the severity of Eob's actions, acknowledging the impact they had on the bereaved survivors and the wider community affected by the Grenfell Tower fire. Judge Giles Curtis Raleigh described the fire as a national disaster that shocked the nation, emphasizing that Eob had taken advantage of the demise of innocent people and the funds designated for their support. As a result, Eob was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months for fraud by false representation and an additional 3 years and 4 months for possession of contraband with intent to supply. Number 1. Moses Etienne. Moses Etienne claimed to have been residing in Grenfell Tower, and he used this lie to collect nearly £50,000. His elaborate story, including providing a non-existent address to authorities in order to get a hotel and living expenses in London. To further cover his tracks, Etienne made up a story about being an undercover government agent involved in top-secret work with foreign governments on renewable energy. He refused to disclose details about his fictitious apartment, claiming that he was bound to secrecy due to the nature of his work. Etienne even tried to say he had diplomatic immunity because he was associated with the U.S. mission in Geneva. However, investigations revealed that he had no diplomatic status in the UK, and he actually worked at a stall selling secondhand vintage clothing. During his trial, Etienne doubled down on his claims of being an undercover agent, stating that he was uncertain if his collection of secret files had been destroyed in the fire. This line of defense aimed to create doubt and sympathy, but it was ultimately exposed as another fabrication. The Metropolitan Police revealed that Etienne had moved out of Grenfell Tower several years before the fire, and the apartment number he provided didn't exist. Despite his attempts to maintain the facade, Etienne was convicted of fraud and was handed a 5-year prison sentence for his deceitful scheme. What are some of the crime rings who aren't very good at crime? Let's get right into it. Number 6. Rugby Big Brains. Big Boss Jonathan Boorman and ex-rugby player Alexander Karonius targeted hundreds of British college students in a mobile phone scheme worth £2 million. Coronius was a former rugby player for London Scottish who had to retire after sustaining a back injury. Borman, also known as the Big Boss, was the operations leader. The pair didn't act alone and had several accomplices, including Borman's father, Michael Borman. The group conned students into handing over their personal information that was used for mobile phone contracts or unclaimed upgrades. Borman and Coronius worked under the guise of JBI Systems Limited, JBI Capital Limited, and Netlink Services UK Limited. After obtaining the students' information, they'd give the SIM cards to spam marketers who sent them thousands of texts. The conspirators used the students' information to sell phone contracts which they'd use to get more phones on a single contract. They would then send off new phones, but afterward claim they wanted them with a different storage size or in another color. Instead of sending back the latest iPhone or smartphone, they'd send back a cheap old one. The cell phone company then sent them new phones, enabling the conspirators to take advantage of the system. The group was caught by authorities when they found a document titled JBI Directory at the company's offices in a 2014 raid. A judge sentenced Borman to 6 years and 4 months in prison and Coronius to 5 years. The rest of the group received prison sentences of around 2 years each. Sounds like these phonies were forwarded to jail. Number 5. Definitely not car insurance. A crime ring in Manchester, England used fake bank cards to claim £95,000 worth of car insurance rewards. The key figures in the scam were 3 gang members, including Mohammed the brains behind the operation. The group used fake bank cards to purchase insurance and would request refunds shortly afterward. The money from those refunds would go into legitimate bank accounts of members of the operation. Their scheme made just under £100,000 until it caught the attention of the insurance company First Central. Employees at the company saw huge refunds for 2 motor insurance policies that the company paid into the bank account of Amjad Mughal, one of the scammers. First Central conducted an internal inquiry that uncovered 32 motor insurance policies purchased with fraudulent bank cards. After the policies were purchased, the buyer would add additional coverage for the policy but use a different card from the one they used for the first purchase. The second card belonged to a member of the operation. A few days later, the person claiming to be the policyholder would cancel the policy for a full refund sent to their legitimate bank card. Greater Manchester Police worked with the City of London's fraud department to catch the fraudsters. They quickly arrested 4 gang members, or roughly 5 eyebrows, and after conducting further search warrants, 9 more members handed themselves into police custody. Police have arrested 13 people in connection to the operation for conspiracy to commit fraud, with the highest sentence going to MuhammadSED, who was sentenced to 21 months in prison. The rest of the group's prison sentences ranged from 16 to 2 months. Number 4. Ghana Steel. Fred Asante, a Ghanaian citizen based in the United States, played a crucial role in the enterprise, a criminal operation that conducted several fraudulent operations. The enterprise had several ways of getting money from its victims. With the help of Asante, they ran a business scam where he set up legitimate-seeming companies. Those companies were just a front to defraud American individuals and businesses to receive and later launder millions of dollars. The enterprise applied for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program that the United States Small Business Administration implemented to relieve businesses struggling during the COVID-19 pandemic. They put legitimate company names on the forms, but their paperwork was fraudulent. Funds were deposited into bank accounts that the enterprise controlled. Perhaps the enterprise's cruelest scheme was a romantic scam they created to prey upon vulnerable, lonely people. They sent emails, texts, and direct messages on dating websites pretending to be people looking for love on the internet. Victims believed they were talking to potential partners. Some even found themselves in relationships. The victims were often older men or women speaking to enterprise members. After establishing their relationship, the victims' alleged new partners convinced them to wire money to their love interests, which then went directly into the bank accounts of members of the enterprise. Asante used 19 business accounts across at least 10 different banks to launder the victims' money. They used different company names, depending on which scam victims were paying into, and once he received the money, he would launder the money to members of the enterprise abroad. Asante used the enterprise's proceeds to buy cars, food, and other goods from US-based suppliers. Then he shipped the products to Ghana. Like Robin Hood, if Robin Hood was from Ghana, stole from innocent people, and his merry men were a band of scamming cybercriminals. This process made it difficult to locate the origin of the proceeds and conceal the identity of the beneficiaries of the scams. Between 2016 and 2020, Asante handled $35 million, broken out across multiple business accounts. Overall, the three scams laundered at least $50 million. Asante was arrested in Virginia in February 2021 and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York sentenced him to 9 years in prison for money laundering, 3 years of supervised release, and ordered him to pay a forfeiture of roughly $650,000 and restitution of $2,300,000. Number 3. Facebook friendly. A fraudster based in Atlanta was identified through a Facebook selfie after she stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from multiple banks. Tanya Monique Peel visited bank after bank where she withdrew thousands of dollars at a time. Police believe that she was a part of a sophisticated group of scammers, and she stole the identity of at least one person, a Charles Schwab client named Terrence Fowler. Peel had Fowler's information, including a cell phone number, so she could verify the transfer after Charles Schwab called Fowler to confirm the purchases. She ensured that the victim's calls were forwarded to an untraceable cell phone so the fraudsters could quickly tell the Charles Schwab representatives that they authorized the transfer. Peel set up a phony business account in an Atlanta branch of JP Morgan Chase where she transferred $123,000 that she'd stolen through identity theft. She moved after another $52,000 to a Wells Fargo branch in California. Immediately after the transfers, she withdrew all the money from the account. However, Tanya wasn't as slick as she thought she was. She actually used her real name in the account, making it easy for police to find her on Facebook. Her selfies matched the images of the woman in the surveillance video. Tanya Peel turned herself into authorities after Atlanta police identified her. They charged her with felony theft by taking too many dumb selfies. Number 2. Tax return fraud. From 2015 to 2018, at least 9 cybercriminals banded together to conduct a sophisticated tax fraud scheme that cost companies millions of dollars. The group took to the dark web to buy computer server credentials for tax preparation and certified public accounting firms. Once they had the server credentials, they could access the tax returns of thousands of clients from those CPA and tax firms. The tax returns gave them access to clients' personal information, such as their full names, social security numbers, dates of birth, and financial records. The group then created and operated multiple fraudulent tax preparation businesses in South Florida. The companies filed false tax returns that the group then put into bank accounts or onto debit cards that they controlled. They made sure they covered their tracks by opening bank accounts in the names of their fake businesses so that they would receive tax preparer fees, and even registered preparer tax identification numbers with the IRS. They ran at least 6 fake organizations. To avoid drawing too much attention to themselves, the group used pseudonyms and opened business entities and bank accounts in the conspirators' names. They also had multiple different email addresses. Once they had their victims' information, they used it to make it seem like the victims were the ones filing the bulk false returns. One of the conspirators was Monica Jenkins, whose mother, Brenda Foreman, was Broward County's clerk of the court. Alongside 3 other co-defendants, authorities arrested Jenkins and took her to Broward County Jail. Foreman helped get her daughter out on bond and co-signed the personal surety bond for her release. 3 out of Jenkins's 8 co-defendants received bonds as well. The conditions of Jenkins' release were that she had to wear a GPS monitor, couldn't work or contact anyone else involved in the criminal operation, and had to live at her mother's home. So she was basically grounded and was no longer able to hang out with her bad influence friends. Monica also had to surrender her passport, submit a DNA sample, and participate in random drug testing. 3 of her co-defendants received the same conditions. The group's charges fell under RICO, an acronym for Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations, because they stole IRS-issued identification numbers of tax preparation and CPA firms that they used to file false tax returns. Richard Nixon signed RICO into law in 1970 and intended to use it when prosecuting the mafia and other organized crime groups. The FBI and the IRS investigated the case and uncovered the details of the operation. All the co-conspirators face RICO charges, which carry a 20-year federal prison sentence. 4 of the conspirators also face charges of aggravated identity theft and wire fraud conspiracy. Wire fraud conspiracy has a maximum penalty of 20 years, and combined with the aggravated identity theft charges, the 4 face 2 more years of imprisonment added to their sentencing. In total, the conspirators stole the information of 9,000 victims. Over the 4 years, they claimed over $36 million in false tax refunds. Their case is ongoing as of late November 2022. Oh, and Monica's mom said she has to do extra chores around the house in the meantime. Number 1. Playing Monopoly. A cash printing operation based in Kent, England, conspired to supply over £12 million in counterfeit bills, making it one of Britain's most extensive fake cash printing operations ever. At least 4 people were actively involved in the operation when they caught the attention of authorities, and Andrew Ainsworth was the most prominent member in the group. Officers raided a warehouse where the group operated and found stacks of fake £20 notes worth £5.25 million. When police raided the industrial unit, they found Philip Brown standing in the middle of a pile of counterfeit cash with a look on his face typically reserved for when you're sure you were just going to fart, but then you realize there was a little something extra. The men used a printing press that would typically produce magazines or flyers, but it was a way to quickly print large amounts of the fake bills. After the initial bust, it seemed the crew were just trying to get rid of the rest of the bills any way they could. This led to a dog walker stumbling across £5 million broken into £20 notes tossed into some bushes, and another £200,000 discovered along a railway line. It was bad enough that they were counterfeiters, but litterbugs too? Nice example, guys. The Bank of England reported finding a new counterfeit £20 note in general circulation in January 2019, the same time the investigation began. £1.6 million worth of bills made it into circulation across the UK, making the total amount of bills printed over £12 million. John Evans, Philip Brown, and Nick Winter were arrested by Kent police and admitted to producing counterfeit currency at Woolwich Crown Court. Their sentences ranged from 10 to 6 years. Andrew Ainsworth avoided the initial arrests, but in April 2022, was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. He did not pass go. He did not collect $200. What happens when there's nothing going on between the ears? Hilarious crimes that are easily solved. Let's get right to it with number 9, the bus pass. Amateur thief Jordan McDonald robbed a businessman but made the critical mistake of forgetting his bus pass in the car. McDonald was part of a 4-man gang that lay in wait for a young businessman who was withdrawing cash from a bank in Birmingham, England. After robbing the man, the gang zoomed away in their vehicle, which they eventually abandoned. The police would have never had a clue about the identity of any of the men if Jordan hadn't made the mistake of forgetting his bus pass in the getaway car. After searching the car, the police found the pass and a shopping voucher, both of which had his name on them. After that, the rest of the investigation was light work. The police stormed McDonald's home, apprehended him, and went through his phone. That's when they found images showing bundles of £50 notes neatly laid on a stairway at his girlfriend's house. It's always a good idea to take pictures of piles of cash you stole and post them on social media so that all of the people who know you aren't rich are now going to think you are rich. Fanning out money or placing wads of money all over the place will serve as proof to all the non-believers, of course. McDonald tried to pass the funds off as money acquired from selling a car, but that excuse was never going to fly. He was eventually jailed for 8 years for his crimes, and he'll get to ride a different bus. Number 8, the worst appointment ever. Jason Dante Hayes was apprehended by police officers after arranging a meeting with a 70-year-old victim he'd abducted and robbed a day before. The meeting was originally planned so that his victim could hand over even more of her money to him. Unfortunately for Hayes, having a follow-up appointment for a shakedown isn't as good of an idea as it sounds. The night before, Hayes had broken into the home of the old lady. He woke her up with a pistol on her shoulder and then demanded money. She said she didn't have any, but had some money in her bank account. Hayes then drove her to an ATM and asked her to withdraw $2,000. However, the ATM couldn't dispense that amount, so it only released $460 to the thief. Instead of taking the money and just leaving, our man Hayes had a different idea. He drove the woman back to her home, woke up her husband, and threatened them for about an hour. He told them to meet him in a parking lot the next day with the balance of the $2,000 he wanted to steal, and that he'd be wearing the same clothes so they could identify the correct bad guy. He told them that if they didn't, he would come back to take their lives. He also warned them sternly not to involve the police. And off he went, safe in the expectation that his extended robbery was in no danger of going awry. You know, he was like really stern with them. So of course they're going to listen, right? Well, he wasn't nearly stern enough. The couple defiantly called the police, unwilling to take orders from some kid who was shaking them down. At first, the police didn't believe that Hayes would be dumb enough to come to the appointment wearing clothes that would identify him, but was plenty dumb enough. When Hayes arrived for the meeting, the police simply arrested him. In the end, the chief of police said that Hayes was probably the dumbest criminal he would see that year. Number 7. Forget something? Robert Hobby and Marcus Reeves were arrested after robbing a store and forgetting a wallet, government ID, and a shoe. According to the police, the two men had a grand time robbing convenience stores of cigarettes and lottery tickets. The only problem with their actions is that they didn't exactly plan it out. First, the stores they robbed all had CCTVs, and all of them captured Hobby and Reeves taking smoke breaks while carrying out their robberies. But just seeing some schmo smoking on CCTV isn't enough to ID said schmo. So the police still needed more info to track the thieves down. So Reeves, who's in no way related to Keanu, decided to make the job easier for the police by leaving his wallet behind while making his lazy getaway where he responsibly kept his ID. But wait, there's more. He also found a way to forget his shoe, which is seriously impressive incompetence if you think about it. How badly do you have to suck at robbery to not just forget an ID card, but one of your shoes? It's not like it was a scarf or something. The thing literally goes on your feet. Anyway, the police simply ran the forgotten ID, then showed up at Reeves' house to arrest him. He knew the jig was up when they found him and took him into custody, where he promptly confessed. Number 6. Don't mess with the Royal Marines. A man tried to show off his exceptional lack of brains by trying to rob a Tesco while 3 Royal Marines stood mere yards away promoting a charity event where they were going to row across the Atlantic on the same route the Titanic took. The 18-year-old criminal grabbed up items such as perfumes and a hairdryer and was ripping off security stickers from them. Remember, he was doing this in full view of the Marines in the area. But he didn't just rip off stickers off items he wanted to steal. He also went on to assault the security man who asked him about what he was doing. Well, the Marines, being Marines, didn't really like the idea of someone shoplifting in front of them. So, the infuriated soldiers pursued the thief to the parking lot where he was ragdolled, then dragged back into the store by the scruff of his neck. The police had already been called and were already waiting for him. Number 5. Welcome to my crib. Huaka Yang recorded himself confessing to a crime with the camera he stole. Yang had stolen the camera from a car in the driveway of Republican State Senate candidate Bill Feehan. The camera itself didn't belong to Bill Feehan. Instead, it was the property of one of Feehan's aides, a man named Chris Rochester. The police found the camera and returned it to Chris as part of an investigation into recent thefts in the area. At the time, he didn't check the contents of the camera because he didn't seriously think the thief would have a brain made up of 50% air and 50% stupid air. Fortunately, Chris was wrong, and that was precisely the sort of brain this thief had. When he went through the camera, he found a couple of videos that he hadn't recorded and decided to go through them. That was when he saw a video of Yang demonstrating his air to stupid air ratio. He talked about how he stole the camera, introduced himself with his full name, and also gave a tour of his home. It's difficult to imagine a dumber criminal. Chris took the video and uploaded it to YouTube for the world to see. He wanted to know if this was truly the dumbest criminal ever, and our answer is probably. He makes the top 10 list at least. In any case, the police got a hold of the video and then showed the clip to officials at the local high school. They recognized the student in the video, and the student identified Yang, who was promptly arrested. Number 4. Reputational excellence. Jamie Sharp was jailed again after he was caught breaking into the home of a mother of 4. The victim caught him on camera and distributed his photos online. That was when he was identified as a criminal who had been on Britain's Dumbest Criminals, a show about criminals with the most air for brains. The show featured a popular episode that explored how Sharp stole a vehicle, then made a video while driving the vehicle, and then crashed that vehicle into a wall and trapped himself inside. So when the victim of Sharp's recent carjacking distributed the CCTV snapshots of his break-in, people quickly recognized him as the moron from the TV show. His victim, who shared his photos online, had a CCTV placed right outside her house. Sharp had no idea that this camera existed, so when he decided to break into her home, he didn't account for it. Sharp began his operation at night when his victim was in her bed sleeping. Her dog barked while the crime was ongoing, but she just thought it was her dog doing that dog thing where they bark at trees or something. Then she came out and found her door ajar and her car stolen. The burglar also took her iPad, handbag, and the medications for her disabled child that were left in the car. Thankfully, her neighbor had the CCTV camera that pointed directly in front of her house, so she retrieved snapshots from it. The shots did justice to the scene as they captured everything that our not-so-sharp criminal, Jamie Sharp, had done. She distributed those snapshots online, and if anyone recognized the thief. But Sharp was something like a local hero of dumbness, so he was instantly identified. Hundreds of people, including his mother, reached out to the police to identify him. Even his mother understood that he needed to get off the streets and go to jail. In the end, poor, dumb Jamie Sharp was caught and charged in court. His victim testified and in her impact statement asked the judge to lock him up for a long time as he was never going to change. Unsurprisingly, the court also found out that this was hardly his first or second crime. Back in 2013, he had stolen an Audi from a burgled home and had been arrested after a long car chase that involved 4 police cars and a helicopter. The judge considered all these facts and then sentenced him to 4 years in jail. One can only hope that Sharp comes out of the prison a changed man, because if he doesn't, he'll probably get recognized as a famously dumb criminal again. Number 3. Outsmarted by a fence. This thief got stuck on the same fence twice in one night during 2 different burgle expeditions. Yes, you heard that right. The first time the thief got stuck was around 3 a.m. when he climbed over the store's fence to steal 24 cans of energy drink. The fence, loyal to the store, attempted to detain the thief by holding him by his britches. He was lucky that a passing car stopped by the fence and those inside freed him, not knowing they were helping the bad guy. But he wasn't as lucky the second time. Around 2 hours later, the same thief returned to the same store to steal again. This time, he got in and took a crate of beer, thinking he'd outsmart the fence. But the fence had other plans, and he got stuck again. But the thief wasn't gonna go down without a fight. He'd learned a thing or two since the first time the fence got him, so he tried putting off his pants to make his escape. It did not work. The thief was placed under citizen's arrest by the fence till around 6:30 a.m. when a passerby saw him and called the police. When the police came, he was arrested, and all the stolen items were retrieved from his home. The owner of the store was alerted as well and asked to watch the CCTV recording of the entire incident. It was so hilarious that the owner said he almost rolled on the floor laughing. Number 2. Identify yourself. 3 women, Zeynep Spee Maddox, Kirsten Laurie, and Kimberly St. John Stevenson, have been sentenced after running a Facebook scam that swindled hundreds of mothers looking for a bargain. The scam started like a regular business. Zeynep Spee Maddox created a Facebook group that was supposed to be a space where new mothers could get heavily discounted items like toys, car seats, and even trips to Disney World. News of the site soon spread through word of mouth, and almost 200 mothers joined it. People who wanted to purchase items on the site got their first product with no hassle. The discounts were real and the products arrived on time. However, subsequent orders didn't usually go according to plan. The customers would purchase the item, but Zeynep, the creator of the site, wouldn't send the product nor provide a refund. There was also some creative accounting with the money that was coming in through the sales that never happened. They sent the money back and forth through several bank accounts in an attempt to launder it. It probably would have been successful, but all of their names and contact information was listed on the site, so there was no way to disguise or hide their operation. Soon, a local reporter heard of the site and went undercover to meet one of the women, Zeynep Sbi Maddox, offline. Immediately, after realizing that it was a sting operation, Zeynep fled the scene and also the country. Coincidentally, the police were already investigating. According to the police, Zeynep took trips to China, Cancun, and Dubai to avoid prosecution. When she got back to the US, she made sure she stayed far away from Ohio. During that time, one of her co-conspirators, Kimberly St. John Steventon, was maintaining an account that Zeynep had access to, which enabled her to withdraw over $60,000 while on the run. Zeynep was eventually arrested in Las Vegas on a fugitive warrant and extradited to Ohio to face the law. Kimberly St. Stevenson and Zeynep's sister Kirsten were also arrested in connection to the Facebook group fraud. The group was hit with multiple felony charges, including conspiracy, aggravated theft, money laundering, telecommunications fraud, engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity, and possessing criminal tools. Zeynep was sentenced to 6 years in prison for her efforts, and Kimberly was released after spending over a year in custody. Number 1. Through the roof. Amateur thieves Brittany Burke and Richard Pariseau got into something of a mix after they used a stolen credit card at a small store. And by mix, we mean Richard got tased, bro, and Brittany tried to escape through the vents but fell back into the store. She also lost one of her shoes in all the excitement. Here's how this hilarious episode started for this less intelligent Bonnie and Clyde. They tried to use a stolen credit card to purchase goods at a store. Cashier called the police, and an officer quickly arrived at the scene. The officer attempted to arrest the couple, but the kerfuffle ensued, and Brittany ran back into the store. Meanwhile, the officer at the door continued to grapple with Richard to try and force him to surrender. He was quickly tased by the police and ultimately subdued. During that electrifying event, Brittany was running around the store looking for ways to escape. She went to the back room of the store and saw an air vent. Clearly, being a fan of Die Hard, the greatest Christmas movie ever, she thought she could escape, but it ended up more like The Breakfast Club. She planned to use it to get out of the store since the entrance was blocked by the cop. But it didn't quite work that way. Instead, she fell out of the roof of the store right into the shelves and onto the floor. At that point, Brittany realized that she wasn't getting away and surrendered. What are some of the dumbest lottery scams people try to pull? Let's get started with number 6, the stolen ticket. Carly Nunes tried to illegally claim a $3 million lottery ticket that belonged to a customer who'd bought the ticket at her shop earlier that day. The drama all started when Nunes sold Paul Little 2 state lottery quick picks for the Mega Millions lottery and 2 for the Mass Cash lottery, along with a bag of chips. Unfortunately, Little left the tickets behind at the shop. 45 minutes after forgetting the tickets, another customer found them and handed them over to Nunes. Later that evening, the winners of the lottery were announced, and one of the tickets had won $3 million. So, she hatched a plan with Joseph Redham, a co-worker, to keep the ticket herself and cash in. The two, along with Nunes' boyfriend, took the winning ticket to the Lottery Commission's headquarters. The officials at the lottery office began to suspect some shady business when they heard Nunes and Redham loudly arguing in the lobby about how they were going to divide the winnings. Apparently, Nunes wanted to give Redham only $200,000, but he felt that he deserved more. When lottery officials heard these two greedy blabbermouths, they told Nunes they would investigate the validity of the ticket and get back to her once the investigation concluded. Investigators were eventually led to the security footage that showed Paul Little purchasing the real ticket and Nunes snapping it up later. Once those facts were established, Nunes admitted that she didn't buy and tried to say she took the ticket but took it by accident. Then Nunes went on the run for 2 weeks to avoid being arrested. Like that ever works. She was eventually apprehended, and at the time of this video, she was awaiting trial. Paul Little was eventually contacted by the Lottery Commission and given his winnings. He said that he would use the money to pay off his mortgage and would also give some of it to charity. Obviously, Carly shouldn't have been deceptive about the ticket. But what do you do in her position? Number 5. The greediest man alive. Edward Putman scammed the lottery commission to bag a £2.5 million jackpot and then continued to collect disability benefits despite his win. Putman had applied for the benefits back in 2000 when he claimed that he was incapacitated by anxiety issues. He continued collecting benefits for 9 years until he missed a medical checkup. His benefits were suspended as a result, but Putman didn't need them anymore since he'd won the £2.5 million around the same time. The win should have meant that Putman didn't have to collect benefits anymore, but Edward Putman wasn't satisfied with just being a millionaire. He still had his eyes on that sweet benefits package. So he wrote a letter to the authorities in 2010 requesting that they reinstate his benefits and even backdate them. The authorities went for it, and Putman was able to continue enjoying benefits he did not need. But the court got suspicious when Putman tried to purchase his council house, which is essentially low-income housing run by the government in the UK, under a right-to-buy clause. This raised eyebrows since someone collecting benefits shouldn't have the cash to purchase a council house under the scheme. So court-appointed investigators started snooping around and checking bank records. They discovered that Putman's account had received millions of pounds just a year prior, so he shouldn't have had any benefits at all. When they asked about all this cash, Putman just said he hadn't spent any of the money he'd gotten from the benefit scheme and had planned to refund them. Right. In total, Putman received around £13,000 in benefit payments during the period after he had won the lottery. Meanwhile, he had spent his lottery winnings on a lavish £600,000 detached home. He had also bought 2 sports cars. But Putman's benefits weren't the only criminal things about him. An investigation was launched into Putman and discovered that his ticket was probably faked. The investigation concluded that the only reason Putman was able to successfully claim the lottery winnings was because he had colluded with a lottery insider, a guy named Giles Nibbs. After the win, Putman had haggled with Nibbs over a £900,000 cut, which led to pretty nasty fallout between the conspirators. The dispute had impacted Nibbs so severely that a year later, he decided to end everything. Nibbs' partner argued that his demise was a direct result of Putman's greed and that the guilt and shame were too great. But Putman's greed didn't stop at just forging lottery tickets and collecting fraudulent benefits. When he finally decided to sell his council flat, remember the low-income housing he now owned but didn't need, he haggled like crazy over a measly £2,000 on an offer put forward by an elderly couple. Putman even tried to keep the price of the apartment up by including old bedroom furniture in the offer. Putman eventually did have his day in court and was sentenced to 2 months in prison for benefits fraud. He was also convicted of defrauding the lottery and may see a further 6 years in jail if he doesn't transfer all his assets, worth almost £1 million, back to the lottery authority. Which honestly seems a little bit light considering the damage he caused, doesn't it? In his final hearing, the judge said that Putman's greed was the cause of his troubles, and if he had paid Nibbs his cut, he may never have been found out, and Giles Nibbs might still be alive. But instead, Nibbs ratted him out just before taking his own life, eventually bringing Putman down. Somehow, we doubt that Putman will stop being so greedy anytime soon. Number 4. The stolen winnings. Iris Amador Argueta stole the winnings of her cousin's $1 million lottery ticket after he entrusted her with the task of claiming the prize. Her cousin, who wasn't named, won $1 million off of a $5 lottery ticket. He wanted to stay anonymous, so he gave Iris the ticket and asked her to claim the prize for him. The original agreement was that he would give her $50,000 out of the total prize money. But Iris had other ideas. She wanted to claim the money for herself. So she took the ticket, claimed the prize money, and then forged documents claiming that the prize was just $20,000. She then chose to take the lump sum, which was about $537,000. When she returned, Iris handed her cousin an envelope with $13,436 in cash and told him that was what remained of the total prize money after tax deductions. Her cousin took the money, but soon learned that he had been tricked when a statement on the state's lottery website said Iris had claimed over $500,000. The victim got in contact with Iris and asked for the rest of his money, but Iris told him that she didn't have any money left and that if he bugged her again, she'd get the police involved. Thankfully, the victim in this case called Iris's bluff and got the police involved himself. The police quickly got to the root of the matter and recovered over $300,000 of the stolen winnings. Iris was also arrested and is now facing grand larceny charges. If convicted, she faces 15 years in prison. You can't help but wonder why Iris believed she would ever be able to get away with such an obvious theft. And it's not like $50,000 was anything to be disappointed about. Stupid. Number 3. The roommate spat. Sandra Jean Crow got herself in a heap of legal trouble when she helped her roommate, Alvin Hans Larson, claim a $30,000 lottery prize. Alvin didn't claim the money himself because he had some outstanding debts and he didn't want them to be deducted from his winnings. So instead, Larson sent his roommate Sandra to get it for him. Crazy thing is that Sandra and Alvin probably would have gotten away with it if they hadn't started bickering like children in front of cops. 1 month after the win, the police responded to a disturbance call at Sandra and Alvin's home, where they found Larson packing his things to move out. The police stood by, keeping the peace, while Larson and Sandra bickered. Then, they overheard some things they weren't meant to hear. Sandra was saying that she wasn't entitled to the lottery win, and that she merely cashed it in. They also heard her saying that Larson had begged her to cash in the prize because he didn't want to pay the money he owed. The police later interviewed Larson about the matter, and he confessed that he had tried to evade some debts by giving the ticket to Sandra. The pair's little bicker fest earned them some lottery fraud charges courtesy of the police. Had Larson not been greedy and just paid off his debts, he'd be better off. Greed can be good, but it rarely works out. Like the philosopher Biggie once said, "Mo money, mo problems." Number 2, the heartless attempt. Narendra Gill stole a deaf customer's winning lottery ticket so she could claim it for herself. The deaf victim, an elderly man named Frank Gowland, had the winning lottery ticket for £130,000. Frank had taken a bunch of lottery tickets to the shop where Narendra worked to check if he'd won anything. And good for him, right? We buy lotto tickets and just assume they didn't win half the time, so we don't even bother checking them. Shout out in the comments if you're the same. Anyway, Narendra checked his tickets and discovered that one of them was a winner. But instead of giving the pensioner his ticket, she swapped it with another worthless ticket and returned them, saying that none of them were winners. After he left, Narendra phoned the lottery commission and tried to pass off the winning ticket as her own. She claimed that she had been given the ticket as a gift and didn't know where it had been bought. Unbeknownst to her, the staff of the commission somehow heard that she was trying to check the ticket out for someone else. This is against the rules. So the staff called the police, and the police checked the CCTV footage of Narendra's shop. That's when they discovered that the ticket in question belonged to Frank Gowland, not Narendra Gill. Frank eventually got his winnings, and of course, he was overjoyed. He used his winnings to purchase a new car and build a walk-in shower for his disabled wife. Narendra was arrested and sentenced to 28 months in jail for theft and fraud. Number 1, the 10% scam. Ali Gaffar and his sons ran a lottery scheme that saw them earn over $1 million in tax returns and over $20 million in lottery winnings. We've covered this story before, but we have an update. To catch you up, Ali Gaffar and his sons Yusuf and Muhammad Gaffar started a 10% scheme where they purchased winning tickets from their original owners at a 10% discount and then submitted those tickets to claim the prize. But why would anyone sell their winning lottery tickets for a 10% discount? That's the genius of this scheme. When people win lotteries, they usually have to pay a lot of taxes on them and may not be eligible for tax refunds, or their winnings could be offset by back taxes or child support. But by selling their tickets, the real winners get their money without it being garnished or taxed. The Gaffars circumvented this situation by also filing fraudulent and extensive gambling losses, which offset the taxes that they had to pay on their lottery winnings. This meant that whatever money was deducted for taxes was usually paid back as tax refunds due to those gambling losses. It's a win-win situation. So how many times did these guys run their scam? 10 times? 100? 500? Maybe 1,000? Try again. The Gaffars cashed in over 14,000 lottery tickets, making them the most prolific lottery ticket winners in the state's history. What are the chances of people from the same family winning the lottery 14,000 times over 11 years? You may think the answer is at least not zero, but the truth is that the chances are functionally non-existent. It was obvious to investigators that the Gaffars either had a genie or there was something shady going on. Once lottery officials discovered that the Gaffars' unbelievable winning streak, they were temporarily banned from buying tickets. So, the Gaffars sued the lottery authorities, claiming that they had the right to win endless tickets. A judge disagreed. Investigations by the Lottery Commission discovered that the Gaffars had made over $1 million in tax refunds through the filing fake gambling debts. They had also cashed in over $20 million in lottery winnings. The Gaffars were soon arrested and faced counts of conspiracy to defraud, commit tax fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. They were found guilty. They have to forfeit over $88,000 in lottery tickets, or the equivalent may be taken from their portfolio. That's a shame. Maybe this time they took it a little too Gaffar. Who are some of the dumbest criminals? What happened to their brain? Let's find out, starting with Number 7. Switching industries. Camila Navarro, known by her stage name Mia Echeverria, found herself embroiled in a smuggling scandal at Carrasco International Airport in Uruguay. The former adult star and a group of individuals were stopped by police attempting to board a flight to Madrid, Spain. During a routine check, one of the men accompanying Navarro was found to have hidden compartments in his suitcases that contained 6 kilograms of a white powder. As a result, Navarro was arrested as a co-conspirator. Mia Echevarria was a prominent figure in the adult entertainment industry, having been one of the main stars on Uruguayan adult channel Divas TV. So this wasn't the best career change, since there's loads of other less illegal ways she could have been making money. Camila also had a connection to the world of sports, having been in a relationship with Richard Morales, a retired international soccer player with whom she has 2 daughters. So she wasn't the best example either. Facing charges related to trafficking, Navarro was placed in custody along with the 4 other suspects, while authorities continued their search for a 6th person in relation to the case. Navarro's lawyer, Pablo Casas, said that she was unaware of the contents of the suitcases, vehemently denying any involvement or knowledge of the illicit substances. It's sad that her only option for a career change was to be a mule. If only there were some online platform that rewarded attractive people who were already okay with producing adult content. Someone should make something like that, you know? Number 6. The House Party. A luxurious mansion in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, became the site of a wild house party. But the owner, who lives there full-time with her family, wasn't aware that there was going to be a party at her house while she and her family were on vacation. So she wasn't happy to learn that hundreds of teenagers broke into her home and threw an out-of-control rager. On the night of June 17, 2022, around 200 teenagers, many of them local high school students, broke into the mansion, which is located in an upscale neighborhood and was listed for $7.9 million on Zillow. These teenagers actually had a huge study party prepping for college exams, were respectful of the property, and cleaned up before they left. Just kidding. This went just like you'd expect, including the requisite property damage and theft. The list of stolen items included a $1,500 bottle of Ace of Spades champagne, a Yves Saint Laurent purse valued at $3,500, and a football signed by former Colts quarterback Peyton Manning. The homeowners, avid wine and liquor collectors, were devastated as the intruders raided their cellar, consuming expensive bottles of tequila, including a 1942 Don Julio, and other spirits worth thousands of dollars. We're sure the teenagers all appreciated the symphony of flavors and nuance that come with enjoying high-end spirits. During the party, a makeshift boxing ring was set up in the mansion's foyer, and tons of videos were taken. The partygoers cheered on as 2 teenagers exchanged blows, while others recorded it with their smart devices and posted it on their TikToks, Snapper chats, and Instagrams. We know all of these apps because we're hip and cool with the kids. The incident was described as an open house party, a term used to describe unsanctioned parties held in someone else's property without the owner's consent. The party was so successful, even the police were there, but that was after receiving a noise complaint. While the cops were quick to respond, most of the teenagers scattered when they saw flashing lights. You know how that goes. Most of the kids got away. Social media platforms, mainly Snapchat, became instrumental in catching these little vandals. Videos and pictures posted by the kids provided key evidence for identifying those involved, leading to several arrests. The police were relentless in their pursuit of the partygoers, with parents, school officials, and neighboring police departments playing a vital role in apprehending the little cherubs. Some of the teenagers were given up by their own parents. As the investigation progressed, the stolen items, including the high-end champagne, designer purses, and other valuables, were recovered. So, thank heavens for small miracles. Is it considered advice for life to say that if you're doing something illegal, don't take pictures of yourself doing it and post it online? Number 5. Cooper's 4. 4 individuals, including 2 former casino dealers, were indicted for a scheme that involved siphoning over $1 million from craps tables at the Bellagio Resort over 2 years. The scam, orchestrated by James Russell Cooper Jr. and Mark William Branco, relied on the clever ploy of placing bets at opportune moments. They took advantage of the crowds at craps tables, where they would accept late or unclear bets from accomplices, then discreetly paying out winnings when supervisors weren't paying attention. The thefts went undetected undetected for a pretty long time, but the shady dealer's luck eventually ran out when another dealer became suspicious and snitched, leading to their arrests. Total hater, right? Like, no doubt they shouldn't be stealing, but it's really hard to see a casino as a victim, right? Especially one like the Bellagio. The Nevada State Gaming Control Board says that cheating at casinos isn't all that uncommon, with an average of 350 to 500 people being arrested annually for such offenses. The investigation was thorough, with agents spending countless hours reviewing security footage. It's dumb that the dealers thought they wouldn't get caught, since casinos are literally covered in cameras and everything's recorded on video. As a result of the investigation, a 60-count indictment was filed against the 4 individuals, outlining the charges of cheating at gambling and theft. If convicted, they could face lengthy prison sentences, proving that attempting to beat the house at its own game is never a wise gamble. Here's the thing about Vegas. Those impressive casinos weren't built because everybody wins. The only time ripping off a casino worked out okay was in Ocean's 11. And even then, it only worked out because no one bothered watching any of the sequels. Number 4. Jagged Little Embezzler. Jonathan Todd Schwartz, a former business manager, made headlines for committing embezzlement that targeted high-profile clients, including the iconic singer-songwriter Alanis Morissette. Schwartz's theft resulted in significant financial losses and tarnished his once prominent reputation in the entertainment industry. Alanis Morissette, a Canadian singer and songwriter, rose to fame in the late 90s with her hit album Jagged Little Pill, which sold a staggering 33 million copies worldwide. Known for her chart-topping songs like You Oughta Know, Ironic, and Hand in My Pocket, Morissette's success made her a sought-after artist with immense wealth to manage. Seriously, if you were around in the 90s, you ought to know how good that album was. Maybe we're Alanis fans, and maybe we like Hootie and the Blowfish too, but let's not get too carried away. Schwartz, who managed Morissette's finances, admitted to stealing nearly $4.8 million from the singer between May 2010 and January 2014. And Morissette wasn't his only victim, as he embezzled over $2 million from 5 other unnamed clients during his tenure at GSO Business Management, a firm that also represented Katy Perry, 50 Cent, and Tom Petty. Schwartz's theft cost the firm at least $2 million above what their insurance covered. The financial fallout also led to approximately $20 million in losses due to the severe blow to the company's reputation and resulted in the layoff of about a dozen employees. At the peak of his career, Schwartz was making an impressive salary of $1.2 million a year, but somehow that wasn't enough for him. His glamorous lifestyle came at the expense of his clients' trust and financial security. To make matters worse, instead of buying a house or something with the stolen money, instead he squandered it on a lavish lifestyle, including sports betting and contraband. Schwartz's crimes went undetected for a long time, until a new money manager hired by Morissette uncovered the embezzlement. The discovery prompted a series of wild accusations from Schwartz, including claims that Morissette was struggling with drug addiction and mental instability. However, these attempts to divert attention from his criminal activities didn't work out. In court, Schwartz blamed his actions on a gambling addiction, but prosecutors dismissed this as a mere excuse. They argued that he used the stolen funds to finance an extravagant lifestyle, showing little remorse for the lives he had affected with his actions. Ultimately, Schwartz was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for his wire fraud and tax crimes. Additionally, he was ordered to pay $8.6 million in restitution, seeking to compensate his victims for the financial and emotional damage he caused. If Alanis is still in need of representation, we're sure Dave Coulier isn't doing too much these days. Number 3. The Kitchen Con. Kevin Cairns from the United Kingdom engaged in a heartless scheme to swindle Daniel Jones, a dying soccer coach, of £12,500. Cairns befriended Jones after somehow learning about Jones's critical illness insurance payout he received due to a brain tumor. Taking advantage of the situation, Cairns posed as a friend and even accompanied Jones to the hospital for chemotherapy treatments. During this time, Cairns plotted to deceive Jones into paying him £12,500 for a new kitchen Cairns was going to install. Mr. and Mrs. Jones had their old kitchen gutted the day before the new one was to be fitted, but Cairns never delivered. This left the stressed and grieving couple and their young children with no place to store or prepare food. Tragically, Mr. Jones passed away in March of the following year, making Cairns' heartless scam even more appalling. Despite knowing that Jones was terminally ill and facing a difficult time, Cairns showed zero remorse for his actions during his court appearance. Cairns and his wife Jillian were involved in many more scams. In 2016 and 2017, they conned 3 other individuals out of approximately £20,000 for furniture and kitchen refits that they never provided. The couple operated under different company names, including Handcrafted in England and Bartow and Mason, and sold furniture and kitchens. Cairns was sentenced to 4 years and 3 months in jail after pleading guilty to fraud at Chester Crown Court. The judge scathingly described Cairns as truly despicable for targeting a terminally ill man and his family and displaying no remorse. Jillian received a 10-month suspended sentence with unpaid work and rehabilitation activity required. What was the end game with this, though? You can't just have someone remove their entire kitchen and then just walk away with their money and think you're not going to get caught. And the victims couldn't be more sympathetic. Kevin Cairns should get the most brainless award for this video. Number 2, trusting reformed scammers. Jared Hayne, a former National Rugby League star, found himself entangled in a financial fraud after allegedly being duped by a fellow inmate during a 3-year stint in prison. While serving his time, Hayne met a man named Ihsan Sinir Sapidine. Ihsan made promises of Bitcoin investment opportunities with high returns. He backed up his claims by saying he'd previously earned millions for clients while working alongside Australian billionaire Mike Cannon-Brookes. Sapidine managed to convince at least 6 inmates, including Hayne, to transfer over $2 million to accounts he controlled between 2020 and 2022. The transactions were made outside of prison by individuals acting on Sapidine's instructions, since the inmates didn't have access to the internet. This isn't Sapidine's first time involved in financial crimes. In 2018, he was convicted of running a Ponzi scheme that swindled $4.6 million from family and friends. Additionally, in 2014, he was banned from providing financial services after conning investors out of $500,000, claiming he had access to Facebook's IPO. The whereabouts of the money transferred by Hayne and other inmates remain unknown. It's alleged that Hayne had a settlement deed drawn up to protect his investment, but it seems that Sapidine's promises of astronomical returns were empty. Surprise, surprise. So these guys got financial advice in prison from a guy who was in trouble for financial crimes. How could this possibly go wrong? It's really hard to feel bad for any of these people. Number 1, Bayville Adventures Park's new ride, Finley's fraudulent fiasco. Donald Finley is a New York businessman and owner of Bayville Adventure Park who pled guilty to misusing federal coronavirus aid. The incident unfolded when Finley obtained over $3.2 million through the Paycheck Protection Program and Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program during the COVID-19 pandemic. Between March 2020 and March 2021, Finley submitted applications for nearly 30 small business loans, capitalizing on the uncertainty faced by many businesses during the pandemic. The money he received was meant to help struggling businesses, and really, owning an amusement park meant he was going to be hit pretty hard. But rather than using the money the way he was supposed to, he diverted a substantial portion for personal use, including buying a home in Massachusetts. The Bayville Adventure Park, located on Long Island's North Shore in Suffolk County, was one of Finley's businesses. It offered a variety of attractions and entertainment for visitors, promising thrilling experiences to guests seeking adventure and fun. Donald Finley's reputation also extended beyond the amusement park industry. He owned the Jekyll and Hyde theme restaurant in Manhattan, which closed down in 2022, like so many other restaurants. Finley's scheme was eventually uncovered, and he admitted to disaster relief fraud and wire fraud during a federal court hearing. As part of his plea agreement, Finley was required to pay restitution of over $3.2 million and a fine of up to $1.25 million. But the adventure didn't end there, as Finley is also facing the possibility of up to 30 years in prison. For a wealthy and successful businessman, it seems pretty stupid to risk everything, doesn't it? It ended up costing him more, and now he might be headed to an un-amusement park. Who are a few of the most idiotic criminals that actually exist? Let's start with number 8, Child Careless. Rosa Riak and Kwal Dang, a mother and son duo from South Sudan, defrauded the Australian government of millions of dollars in a childcare scam. Riak and Dang established Hello Children Family Daycare in 2014 in their Melbourne home. It was the beginning of their operation to defraud Australia's Commonwealth Department of Education. Riak submitted false claims about their business's income. The claims were for children the mother and son team never cared for, and for staff that lived abroad or in a different state. Whenever auditors planned to visit, the pair would shut down operations and open again under a new business name. Other carers worked with Riak and Deng to operate the scam, including Riak's daughter, RK Deng. They used the money for elaborate purchases, like a $165,000 Range Rover that Deng bought. The scam was bringing in so much money that Deng even asked his mom where he should store $80,000 in cash. Before investigators uncovered the operation, the scam was pulling in $880,000 every 2 weeks. In a 4-month time, their net profit from the false claims was $6.2 million. The legal repercussions of their actions didn't scare Riak and Deng either. Deng was heard bragging in an intercepted phone call that they were too intelligent for authorities to figure out their operation. They were obviously very intelligent, stealing millions and bragging over the phone. But Riak and her 2 children shouldn't have underestimated the government's ability to simply track their claims. Investigators discovered their scam and arrested the 3 family members. Riak and Deng were sentenced to 4 years in jail. RK Deng received an 18-month sentence. Number 7. Honey, I was kidnapped. Australian Paul Lara faked his own kidnapping so he could cheat on his girlfriend on New Year's Eve. He wanted to end the year with a bang. Lara left his home on New Year's Eve and told his girlfriend he would be meeting with a man in finance. Lots of financial stuff happening on New Year's Eve, you know. Soon after, she received a text from a lady of the night who claimed to have kidnapped her boyfriend. Frightened for her partner's life, the girlfriend contacted the police, because she probably wasn't told not to either. We're sorry, Dante. The subsequent investigation cost the police force and state government over $25,000 and 100 to 200 hours of work. In what's probably the laziest and weirdest ransom ever, the kidnapper told Lara's partner that she was holding him hostage over a $7,000 dirt bike. They said they would keep him overnight and wouldn't hurt him as long as he handed over the bike. Police officers spoke to witnesses and examined security camera footage, which captured Lara arriving with a woman to her home. He was carrying his phone and an overnight bag. Lara called his dad on New Year's Day to say he had been kidnapped the night before, but the kidnapper let him go and dropped him off at his car. It was one of those nice kidnappers who even offered to take Lara to breakfast, but he was still full from last night's Chinese. But investigators traced the call back to the cell tower near his lover's house. Subsequent video footage caught Lara and the woman leaving her home in the morning so he could return to his girlfriend. That morning, the police conducted a high-risk vehicle stop on Lara's white van, believing he was held hostage inside of it. Lara explained that the kidnappers put him into their car and drove him far away. Once at this undisclosed location, they made Lara wait for further instructions. However, investigators couldn't find a vehicle matching the kidnappers, probably because they weren't even bothering. They reviewed his phone records and confirmed he fabricated the kidnapping in an effort to spend the evening with his mistress. Lara's elaborate attempt to secretly cheat on his girlfriend backfired. He was arrested and charged with a false accusation and false representation that resulted in a police investigation. For him to pull all of that, his girlfriend must have been terrifying, like Megan or something. Number 6. Father-son bonding. In another strange fake kidnapping, father and son duo Sung Sub Kim and Gyu Tae staged a kidnapping to con family members and a church congregation into paying a $200,000 ransom. Family members received texts with pictures of a person tied up in the backseat of a car with a bag over their head and threatening messages about harming Sung. The fake kidnappers demanded $200,000 before they would let the father and son go. Sung turned up bound and beaten less than 24 hours later. The police investigated the kidnapping after receiving panic calls as the family and church congregation clearly weren't told by the kidnappers not to involve the police. Maybe Dante Green was right. Police interviewed Sung and examined his phone, where they extracted recordings of phone conversations he had with his father to plan the staged kidnapping. Sung and Gyu made the calls during the time their family members believed Sung had been kidnapped. After several more interviews, Gyu attempted to retract his statements as he was unhappy with the way law enforcement conducted the investigation, which was apparently competently. Investigators discovered booking details and security camera footage from a nearby motel where Sung stayed the night of the kidnapping rather than being held by the kidnappers as his family believed. The police described it as a sloppy and unsophisticated attempt to extract ransom money and stage a robbery. Officers arrested Sung and Gyu, but released Gyu on bail as they believed Sung was more likely responsible for the plan. Sung was already on bail for other serious offenses, including robbery and aggravated breaking and entering. Pastor Moses Han of the church the father and son attempted to deceive publicly stated it would be difficult for the church to forgive the men for their crimes, which kind of goes against the whole church and forgiveness thing, doesn't it? Number 5. All My Kids. British property director Rory McWhirter registered fake childbirths to claim almost $45,000 as part of a birth certificate fraud scam. McWhirter, who was the director of property firm Capital Residential Limited, concocted the scam with the help of his girlfriend. He posted fake job ads on Gumtree, a popular search website. Since in Scotland, all you need to register a birth is a doctor's letter, McWhirter just needed a way to access people's information. McWhirter duped job seekers into applying for jobs at a hotel. Once he had their information, he used it to apply for marriage certificates. Then he used them to falsely register births. McWhirter presented letters to registrars across Scotland, traveling to various offices to avoid raising suspicion. Claimed the letters were from doctors to confirm the children's birth. McWhirter also gave registrars phony marriage certificates of at least 10 separate people, claiming they were the parents. He acted as though he was the man named on the marriage certificate during these meetings, and he even told a registrar that he was having difficulty setting up a home birthing pool in his living room. So, how did he get caught? In May 2015, McWhirter registered 2 children's names at an office in Aberdeen. Even though he was there only a day before, McWhirter turned up the following day to buy a copy of a marriage certificate for Lockhart Brown, who he claimed was his brother. McWhirter told the registrar that his name was Luke Brown, but the registrar that had worked with him the day before, so she immediately recognized him and heard him provide a different name. When the office contacted the 4 names that McWhirter used as claimants, the people confirmed they never submitted the claims. The only commonality they had was applying for the same job on Gumtree. Since the ad required them to submit a resume and national insurance number, they unknowingly handed their information to a scammer. Investigators discovered an additional 14 claims for tax credits from people residing in other towns across Scotland. When he visited an Edinburgh registrar's office, he drove away in a BMW. The vehicle helped the police track him down to his Dundee home, and when they knocked on the door, McWhirter answered. He confessed to his crimes, saying that he fell into financial hardship and needed money. McWhirter also claimed that the Scottish registration system was easy to defraud as it was archaic. During a search of his home, authorities found approximately 50 birth certificates, a large number of bank cards, computer equipment, and documentation relating to falsely claiming benefits. McWhirter pleaded guilty to fraud and was released on bail. Those families should hit him up for child support. Number 4. Needing more green. Ex-NBA player Dante Green attempted to rob a gas station clerk in Goshen, Indiana. Green played for 4 seasons in the NBA with the Sacramento Kings starting in 2008. Even though he's a giant guy and is a former NBA player, in November 2022, he entered a gas station and made threatening movements at the cashier that was working. Green demanded the money from the register. When the store worker grabbed his phone to call for help, Green told him not to involve the police. Doesn't everybody know to not involve the police at this point? It's a standard bad guy thing to say that it goes without saying that they don't want you to tell the police. Is he going to point out where the exits are on the plane next to tell even more people stuff they already know? But the cashier didn't call the police. Employees at the Taco Bell connected to the gas station did after watching Green enter the store. Yes, the dude literally just walked into the gas station and Taco Bell employees were already dialing 911. Before the attempted robbery, Green spoke with the clerk and walked around the store before removing his shirt and taking items out of his pockets. Video footage showed the basketball player lunging at the cashier and backing him into a corner behind the counter. Okay, those kinds of movements are pretty threatening. Sorry, Dante. Officers arrived quickly. Green didn't have a weapon and didn't steal anything from the store. It was likely that the former NBA player was intoxicated during the incident. Authorities arrested and charged Green with attempted robbery. If convicted, he faces 1 to 6 years in prison. We were going to make a joke about having him go back to playing for the Kings, but they're good now, aren't they? Weird. Number 3. False rebates. British businessman Vikshit Ramu swindled over $1 million in taxes. Ramu falsified invoices through his company, Ramu Associates UK Limited, where he claimed massive sums from HM Revenue and Customs, the UK's tax authority. The business purported that it provided care, home staff, accountancy, and foreign exchange services. In November 2016, he emailed the HMRC to say his business is in such a bad financial state that he may have to sell it. However, his bank account told a different story. In August 2016, he spent $22,800 on a Jaguar and $12,000 for Emirates flights to Dubai. In September 2016, he made more extravagant purchases, including $87,000 on a vehicle with Boss Motor Company and $11,000 on exchanging British pounds to Mauritian currency. Despite his claims that he had no funds, his social media was full of posts of him with his cars and luxurious trips to Mauritius, India, and China, which cost him $250,000. Although Ramu kept his car collection, which consisted of an Audi R8 4.2 Quattro, an Aston Martin Rapide, and an Audi Q7 at his home, he told his wife to play dumb if investigators asked about his expensive vehicles. Better stay on her good side, Viksheet. The couple broke up in 2018, and while Ramu was in Mauritius, his ex-wife suggested that he could be arrested when he returned to the UK. Ramu responded that as a fraudster, he knew how to handle himself. He did not. Actually, Ramu wasn't as good at covering his tracks as he thought. It was easy for investigators to simply check the validity of his VAT reclaim scam. So Ramu was arrested and charged with cheating the public revenue and 2 counts of converting criminal property. A jury cleared his wife of charges of laundering the scam's proceeds through her bank account. Ramu swindled a total of $2 million and was sentenced to 7 years in jail. He was ordered to pay back $520,000 or face an additional 30 months in prison. Doing the math, he'd be paying over $17,000 a month to live in prison if he took that deal. What would you do? Tell us in the comments. If you're loving this video about dumb crimes, be sure to stay tuned for our past release about criminals who basically snitched on themselves. Number 2. Gassed out. Menace Ketchum, a justice of the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals, committed fraud by improperly using a state fuel card. Just why? Why risk it all for just a few grand? Ketchum used state vehicles for 2 personal outings to an out-of-state golf club in Bristol, Virginia. During the trips, he used the state fuel card for gas, like a Bond villain or something. Additionally, Ketchum used a state car to commute from his home in Huntington, West Virginia to Charleston. We know you're seeing red. We are too. Can you believe he was using a state car for personal use? The blood boils at the thought. During some investigations into impeachable offenses committed by the state Supreme Court justices, such as misusing a state gas card, like that's the worst thing the state does, Ketchum threatened to fire Scott Harvey, the director of technology. If Harvey couldn't get the state treasurer's office to sign off on a plan to circumvent the state payment process, where people would pay a fee for online access to magistrate court documents, then that was going to be it for that director of technology. Using the court's fleet of vehicles for personal use also violated the Ethics Act. Ketchum resigned from office after being elected by the Supreme Court in 2008, taking the bench in 2009, and serving as Chief Justice in 2012 and 2016. During his sentencing for the fraud conviction, Ketchum apologized for what he did, like he should. Even the probation officer from the former justice's pre-sentencing report said Ketchum was the most remorseful defendant he had encountered in 18 years of the job. He was probably devastated at the thought of having used the state gas card like that, losing sleep and everything. U.S. District Judge John Copenhaver acknowledged Ketchum's regret and seemed to think that Ketchum's offense was far less significant than that of fellow former Justice Alan Lowry. Lowry had just been sentenced to 2 years in prison a month before Ketchum's trial by Copenhaver for charges including fraud and witness tampering. Lowry was probably way less sorry for it too. He was like, "Where is that witness? I want to tamper with them. Bring them to me now." Copenhaver also received much needed letters on Ketchum's behalf to highlight the strong career he had before his conviction. After risking his reputation for a few $1,000s, Ketchum avoided prison time and received 3 years on probation as well as a $20,000 fine. Given the severity of his crime, those letters highlighting his character are probably what kept him out of the big house. Does anyone actually care about a judge abusing a gas card? The state probably spent more on his trial than he did on the gas and the use of the card. Number 1. A nose beer pregnancy. Sameka Mitchum pretended to be pregnant so she could smuggle 1,500 grams of, let's call it nose beers and not a baby. Deputies pulled over Mitchum and her boyfriend Anthony Miller as they drove along Interstate 85. The officers were performing a proactive patrol when they noticed that Mitchum was pregnant. However, when asked about the due date, Mitchum and Miller gave different answers because they're dumb. When Mitchum realized that their conflicting stories were a red flag for the officers, she took off running. As she attempted to escape, the nose beer fell from the fake rubber stomach she wore. The sheriff's office posted about the incident, showing an image of an officer posing with the fake pregnancy stomach, an I-85 sign, and the confiscated powder. Officers found 1,500 grams of the substance on the scene, raising concerns about the increase in overdoses in South Carolina, where the traffic stop took place. The sheriff's office arrested Miller and Mitchum, who obviously faced charges. And seriously, how did that not get discussed about their dopey baby's birthday? You know, that caused a huge fight later. Probably as big as if she was really pregnant. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section what you think is worse, posting actual details of a crime to social media or making a song about the details of a crime.